Let's see.
I'm ready to go.
I call to order the meeting of the City Council of University Heights, Tuesday, March 6, 2018. Welcome, everyone. The council is present, and the first order of business is approval of minutes. I'm going to list all the minutes: February 12th, special meeting, February 13th, regular City Council meeting, and February 19th, special council meeting. Are there any additions or corrections of the minutes that I listed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. Okay, first of all, I want to ask the council, does any council member have a conflict of interest on any of the agenda items? If they do, could they speak now? And then put that in the minutes for me, Chris. Okay, I see no conflicts of interest identified. We'll go on to consideration of Resolution 1814. And Sylvia, you were going to speak about that first. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Mayor. In November 2017, residents overwhelmingly supported the ballot measure to use hotel taxes for the purchase of green spaces, among other uses. In January 2018, this newly elected council unanimously made a public commitment to pursue opportunities to create parks and green spaces for the benefit and enjoyment of our community for generations to come. The time to act on this commitment has come, and it's time to talk about how we as a community can finance this vision for parks and green spaces. The vision won't last long since we're up against a mid-June deadline. Tonight, Maggie Berger and John Murphy from Spear Financial will present council with financing options that reduce and/or eliminate the tax burden on residents for this park and green space initiative. Maggie's information will show costs in two scenarios: one, property taxes as the only funding source, and two, the local option sales tax reserve used, and then the estimated hotel-motel taxes picking up the remaining payments. I asked Maggie to provide a very conservative estimate on the projected hotel tax revenue to be on the safe side. Hotel property taxes are not reflected in these financing options, as the assessor's office didn't have a value to work with yet. So Maggie and John, welcome to University Heights City Hall. I think this is your first time that you're here, and we're pleased to have you back. And if you want to take the podium, the podium is all yours.
Okay. Good to know.
Thanks. Amen. Thank you.
Good evening. As Sylvia said, my name is Maggie Berger, and I'm with Spear Financial. My colleague in the audience with me is John Murphy. You have all received a notification card from us. John is a newer employee in our office, and so he will be traveling around with me for probably a year, learning about our presentations and the things that we do. As you all know, and we've talked about before, we are a regulated industry, so there's some testing that he has to do before he can come out and speak to you. Without having myself or Larry. By the way, this is a very beautiful facility. Larry, I believe my colleague, was here last year for your bond sale and was able to be in this facility, but this is my first time. So good job. Nice job. It looks very, very nice in here. So I have brought for you some financing options that would be relatable to you guys converting or producing green space here within the community for University Heights. I have brought three options for you this evening to look at, and I should say three options, three different levels of financing for you. We have under the paperclip, you've got three different staples, and one is for $1.5 million of borrowing. one is for $1.8 million, and one is for $2 million of borrowing. So with that, I'd like to start with the 1.5 and walk you through how we look at this. We won't spend as much time probably on the others as we will on this one, because I hopefully will be kind of teaching you how to read the schedules that we've provided. All of these schedules that we've provided are over a 10-year repayment. And it should be noted that because you are approving your budget this evening, there would not be available room in your budget to implement a debt service levy at this time because you don't have the authorization to borrow this money yet. So that means that in year one, in fiscal year 19, whatever debt would be repaid would need to be paid from a cash source. We don't believe that that is a problem, but we definitely want to show you what that would look like. On the $1.5 million schedule, we are not showing a principal payment being due in fiscal year 19, again, because there's not a levy in place or the ability to levy any dollars there. So we would just be making an interest-only payment. This is a 10-year schedule. The interest rates that we assume we may see in the market about this time of the year, based on where we've seen interest rates on previous sales and where we think projections could be, range from a 1.65 down to that 3.15% interest. Down there below, we show a net interest rate of 2.80. This really just means that probably in today's market, if we were to sell 10-year bonds on a competitive basis, we would be looking at that TIC or that NIC, that NIC, of about 2.8%. That's a very low interest rate. Not quite as low as what we've seen over the last couple of years. Reasons that interest rate has gone up is, first and foremost, short-term interest rates have risen. The Federal Reserve has risen, has moved those short-term interest rates up a couple of times. We are not directly correlated, but indirectly, we see the 10 and the 5-year rates move up. We also did see a jump in interest rates because of tax reform. Part of the interest rate increase that we saw because of the tax reform or the Tax Cut Act was because those corporations that buy your municipal bonds were paying probably 35% tax rate. When they buy tax-exempt bonds, as you all know, those bonds, they don't pay federal income tax on the interest that you pay them for those bonds. So that means they were able to turn in that interest income and be able to say it was more like a 28% tax rate. That was great in the past, but now those corporations are only paying 21% as their max cap under the Tax Reform Act. And so they are wanting a little bit more out of your bond issue because it's not as lucrative to them because the tax exemption does not give them the benefit that it was giving them before by bringing that tax rate down for them. So with that, we show your principal and interest, and kind of right there in the center, we have an estimated 2018 debt service. As you can see in year one, again, just interest is about $33,971. Then from there on, our principal payments range from about $187,000 to about $191,000. This is what we would call level debt service, and this really means that you pay within about $5,000 of the same payment each and every year. In this scenario at $1.5 million, we have not used any of your reserve from your local option sales tax. We have not used any of your hotel motel tax. I will say that in the yellow column, this is your taxable valuation. It should be noted that in fiscal year 19, this valuation is $93,371,000. That valuation for fiscal year 18 that we're operating under right now is about $76 million. It's this building and that building next door that took that valuation from $76 million to approximately $93 million. Those were huge increases in your taxable valuation, just meaning that gives you the opportunity to levy against more dollars because of the higher valuation. With that being said, if we continue to move forward down that debt service, we've built in a growth of about 5% and about 2%. in the next 2 years and 1% thereafter. I think these are very conservative growth rates for the city of University Heights. You have been growing at about a 3 to 5% growth each and every year, even before the taxable valuation that you got off of this building and the building next door to us. So we hope that this is a very conservative look at those two growths, but I want to take you over to the green column for fiscal year 19, which is one number down, and you see 1.91. If the city were to issue $1.5 million and not use any local option sales tax, not use any hotel motel tax, you would be looking at a debt service increase to your citizens of $1.91 over and above what your current tax rate is. That is nothing. That means no other cash is being influxed into this project. That would be in the blue column then, if I owned a home in the city of University Heights and the assessed value on that home was $200,000, my rollback value would be $111,241, meaning that's what I'd pay taxes on. The increase in my taxes would be $212.25 a year, would be the estimate based on that rollback. That's not using any cash, so I don't want to concern anyone, because as Sylvia stated, then we on page 2 ran you a scenario where we used some of this cash. So again, the same debt service schedule at $1.5 million. Now in that tan column, we have confirmed that you have $330,000 of local option sales tax in reserve that you've collected. So if we use that over the first couple 3 years, and the reason we chose to use that just over those first 3 years is valuation for any new hotel, anything that would come online is going to take 18 months after it's built. So it's going to be a while before you may see that valuation. Hotel motel tax receipts aren't going to kick in until those rooms are beginning to be occupied. So we thought that it would be best to use some of that local option sales tax, or to use that in those first 3 years in a way to offset what those costs would be. So in year 1, we use it to cover the cost of the interest. We use in year 2 part of it, and then finish up in year 3 in 2021 with a little bit more. That is then when the hotel motel tax receipts would kick in. You may start collecting hotel motel tax before that, and that would be just fine if it's occupiable before fiscal year 21, which would mean the fall of 20, spring of 21. But we are showing that, with the local option sales tax that you have, you could really not have to use any hotel motel tax till 21. At that point in time, as you can see from that sort of pink purple column, you would need to use about $139,000 of hotel motel tax receipts every year. And we go over, and the way that we ran this, and this was my suggestion to Sylvia, is that without using all of your hotel motel tax and not really knowing what those receipts are, we used a very conservative estimate on those receipts at a 60% occupancy rate at, I believe, $120, maybe a nightly rate that we were kind of using. We thought then that the city may be interested in looking at this then from what 50 cents of additional debt service levy would look like. So on the page before, we were talking about $1.91, and now we're talking about if we raise the debt service levy 50 cents. Honestly, the debt service levy is the wild card in this scenario. And when I say wild card, it's because if you grow faster than our projections, you would not have to levy the 50 cents. Or if your hotel motel taxes were higher, the receipts were higher, you may not have to levy the 50 cents. But we wanted to show you what may be a reasonable levy to be able to develop green space for your community. On 50 cents, if you had a $200,000 home, that would be about a $55 per year increase in your taxes, as the current rollback is situated for fiscal year 19. Okay. It's also very important then that we show you on $1.5 million and then all the other schedules what the cost of issuance is that would be tied to doing that. The ballot initiative that you're talking about, a ballot initiative in the state of Iowa under the code section does require that you would then sell these bonds at a competitive bond sale. There is a requirement for that competitive bond sale, meaning that you're giving everyone the opportunity, banks, underwriters, to bid at a time and a place when you sell these securities. So we have given you what the cost of issuance would be on a competitive bond sale at $1.5 million. We have our fee. As you know, we sell on an auction website, so there's a fee that is associated with that. And they also do some marketing of your bonds for you on that website as well. We have to produce that official statement. You saw that back in 2016. That is the document that is required by the securities law. And that document is all about you. It talks about your financial position, demographic position, talks about property taxes, the debt that's outstanding, the new debt that would be taken out. It is the disclosure document for the people that are interested, the investors, in buying this. We have then our good faith. Again, they are copies, postage, and delivery, about $300. Good faith means on the day of sale, the winning investor is going to wire you 2% of the $1.5 million in this instant. And that's just to hold their feet to the fire so that we have a little money in our pocket so that if they would back away before closing, and I should be honest, that's never happened in my time at Spear, but if they do, you have some money that you could fall back on to use to restart the process. Bond Counsel, we've gotten a fee quote from Bond Counsel for their services, and these services would include doing the documents through the issuance of the debt, but also writing your ballot, because they would be assisting you and have assisted you with writing the ballot. And then Registrar and Paying Agent, that's to Bankers Trust. I think, Chris, you pay them right now on your 2016 note. Instead of you having to come and pay all of the bondholders that are out there, you pay Registrar and Paying Agent. They then turn around and pay and make the disbursements amongst all those bondholders. The Underwriters discount is item number 6, and again, on a competitive basis, we would limit that to 0.8%, same as what we gave the option in 2016, same as what we gave the option in 2017. Now, an underwriter can take up to that amount. They cannot take anything over that amount, but that is what they would use to pay their sales staff, because they're going to buy these bonds and then they're going to resell them maybe locally, regionally, or throughout the nation to be held. So it's important that then we highlight their total cost of issuance on $1.5 million is $34,365 is our very best estimate. And again, these are numbers that we've either confirmed or numbers that are in line with what existing contracts that you have in place. So looking at this, it would be if you set your ballot amount at 1.5 million, you would get 1.5 million. You would pay the 34 cost of issuance out of that amount. So you're going to net just slightly under the 1.5 for the project. I do want to quickly run through for you, and then I will get out of your way, but we also did $1.8 million. Same type of scenario for you on page 1. We've now increased that borrowing to $1.8 million. If we do not use local option sales tax, if we do not use hotel motel tax, now we're looking at a debt service levy of about $2.34 instead of the $1.91. And that is about $250, $260 on that $200,000 home, that tax increase. If we go to page 2 of the 1.8 million, we have now again used local option sales tax at that $330,000 amount that you have. We've also kept in there the 50-cent debt service levy. So again, it's still only about $55, $56 on the taxes, but now you would need to use $67,000 in the first in 2021, and then you would need to use about $177,000 of hotel motel tax receipts each and every year. That's getting a little bit more than what we were looking at on the prior sheet for hotel motel tax receipts. That would be using more of those receipts on an annual basis.
That's in the pink section, right?
That is in that pink or purple section. That is correct. Yep. And then, as you can see, again, we've attached the $1.8 million schedule. This really doesn't change a lot. Things like Underwriters discount, it goes up, but that's really what our difference right there then is for estimated cost of issuance, because that's going to go up with the sizing of the bond. Okay. And then the very last schedule that we did was at $2 million. If the city were to borrow $2 million, it would look like an additional, if you put no fees towards it, no local option sales tax, no hotel motel tax, you're now at about $2.59 of additional debt service levy over and above what your current taxes are. And that's about $290 per year on that $200,000 house. With the use of the cash and keeping that debt service levy at about 50 cents, so a 50-cent increase in the future, potential, and I should say potential, because it always could be offset. The nice thing about a general obligation bond is the last way that you pay with a GO bond is with a debt service levy. If you have other sources of revenue, you have every right under the law to use those other sources of revenue each and every year, and you get to make that decision each and every year. You're not locked into making that decision when you take the debt out. Every year at budget time, you get to make that decision based on where you feel the cash flows will be in that next budget year. Now, if we use the $330,000 in that tan line, we're going to use hotel motel tax, and that's going to need to be approximately $200,000 a year. That's really getting up there in what we estimate, again, on the conservative basis that the receipts would be at. This, again, 50 cents. So we stay at that $55 to $56 range for the debt service. And we've also given you the cost of issuance on the backside of that as well. So I would answer any questions that you have or go through anything further that you need.
Maggie, one quick question. Can you explain to council why we don't have payments over a schedule of 15 years and 20 years?
Right. So we talked about using 15 and 20 years. Your interest rate will go up significantly at a 15 years and even more significantly at a 20 year, especially for borrowing the size of $2 million or less. The investors are going to say, well, that's a really long way out for us to hedge what we think interest rates are going to be. So in that hedging, interest rates are going to go up. I would say that if we were to take this out for 20 years, the interest rate most likely would be about 4%. If we were to take this out 15 years, we're probably in that 350 to 375% range as it stands right now. Again, not a large rate, because remember, as interest rates rise and reinvestment rates rise, your car loans will rise, your mortgages will rise. So these will rise in correlation to them. But we just haven't had 4% interest rates since about 2007, 2008. And so for us to say, well, that's a high interest rate, it is now for what we've seen the last few years. It wasn't back in 2007 and 2008. It was a great interest rate, but we just haven't been seeing those. They've been very low. So part of that is you want to keep this as aggressive as you can afford to be. The one thing that should also be said is with your ballot, you are only approving the amount. You have under the law the general obligation authority to go up to the 20 years. Again, it's not our recommendation. It's not what we discussed with your finance committee because of that higher interest rate. If we got to the point of issuing this debt and we started looking and saying, well, it'd really be nice if we could free up at least one more year or bring those payments down by one more year, we can look at that maybe 11 or 12-year schedule and see what that would do with an interest rate. But it was not our recommendation at this time to go really think anything more than 10, possibly 12 years.
And so would this be a guaranteed 2.8?
It is not a guarantee. These are subject to, this is subject to the market and the market movement. Now, if everyone has a crystal ball, you can tell me if you think the Federal Reserve is going to move on interest rates next week. I'm getting commentary from certain sources saying, sure, they're going to move. They said they were going to move. But then we're also getting commentary saying that the new Fed chair has said, we're not going to move only twice this year. well, we have 4 more quarters to go in the year, and so are they going to move? We had a pretty big adjustment in the stock market 2 weeks ago, and that kind of brought inflation down a little. I'm not sure if they will move or not. I don't know. And so, but I will say this, Mayor, when we see 0.25% movement by the Federal Reserve, we usually don't see a full quarter in the bond market. The bond market may only see 12 basis points, 10 basis points, so maybe half of that. And the bond market moves very slow, where the stock market goes like this every single day. The bond market is very slow and steady because this is, again, a place for flight to safety. I actually believe that the adjustment that the stock market had drove bond rates down just a little bit. And the reason is everyone was in the stock market and highly invested and was excited. And all of a sudden you had these 20 and 30 and 40% drops. And everyone's like, whoa, I gotta save my money and I gotta be more safe. And they rushed in and they started buying up municipal bonds, and the supply just, and so it drove that interest rate down because people were willing to take a little bit less to get that security because municipal bonds are very secure. So really, I think that adjustment, not for my own investment portfolio, was good, but for the bond market, I think that it was okay, actually.
I have a quick question. You probably said this and I probably missed it. Why did you change the hotel income revenue assumptions with the different amounts?
What we were trying to stick with was a 50-cent debt service levy increase. And so we were really backing into, if that's an okay word to say, we were backing into that hotel motel tax, saying that if the city council was willing to go at the 50-cent debt service levy on all these different amounts that we were looking at borrowing, then that is where we would back into that amount. And part of that, I think, is, again, Sylvia and I had some conversations, and right now, hotel motel tax is just a projection. And so we want to make sure that we're projecting in a conservative number and not over projecting what those hotel motel tax receipts could be.
And I think I said that in the opening statement, super conservative in order to ensure that we don't shock our residents with a tax increase. So that's not the end game plan here. So
I will say, and it's completely always your decision, I will say that for a project such as this, I would say that we've had city councils that have increased the debt service levy for projects similar to this and other projects. 50 cents seems like it's a lot, but I will say that at your taxable valuation and what you're growing, to have that 50 cents only be about a $55 impact on those taxes, it's actually very low in comparison to some other cities that have raised 50 cents that just don't have the taxable valuation that you have. So I would say that that's probably a fair amount when we see cities doing some projects that benefit the whole community. That they're, implementing a debt service levy. So again, it's spread out over some of those property taxes as well as these fees.
Right. And then the last question I wanted to clarify is because this is a general obligation commitment from the city. Can you confirm how that works with TIF? The city right now has a $6.7 million TIF, which means that $470,000 in property taxes are rebated back to
Correct.
Maxwell Development. So my question is, can you explain how that TIF commitment works with this bond commitment?
Yeah. So you're seeing the results of that TIF commitment in your general fund levy. So the general fund is what we consider your 810, we call it, and what you can levy against. When you levy against the 810 and you have a TIF agreement of the size that you do, you are noticing that 810 levy or that general fund levy taxable authority is lower than it would be if you didn't have that tax rebate agreement out there. But to that, why we also used a 50-cent debt service levy is debt service is protected from TIF. So when you enter into a TIF agreement, your debt service levy, the county's debt service levy, the school district's debt service levy, the school instructional, and the community college's debt service levy are all protected. and the school Pebble, I should say. So those are all protected levies. And so that just means that you have $93 million of taxable valuation, meaning that that is truly the taxable valuation of the whole city. Now, if we looked at your 810, and Chris probably can confirm this, I would bet your 810 levy in the general fund is somewhere in the neighborhood of $80 to $85 million, meaning that you do get more bang for your buck out of the debt service levy, meaning you can levy more. You get more out of 50 cents of debt service levy.
We'll ask that for Steve, who prepares our budget.
Okay, so you get 50, you're going to get, more out of your 50 cents in the debt service levy than you would get out of 50 cents under the general fund levy. So the agreement that you've entered into is a rebate agreement. So it is tied directly to these buildings paying their taxes. They're called tax rebate agreements. And although they've brought new valuation on for a set number of years or a set dollar amount or a combination thereof, you will rebate them back, all or a portion of their taxes directly related to the taxes that are paid on this building.
Because if we didn't have that TIF rebate, we probably could afford to not even have to go to bond.
Yes, because you would have more money in your general fund that you could levy the general fund in other ways to either have cash up front or to refund some or to be able to pay as you go on some of these projects. So I will say we do use TIF. We use TIF a lot, and that's why, again, we did use the 50-cent debt service levy, because we wanted to kind of prove that you do get a little bit more out of the debt service levy. So it's not a bad idea to debt service levy, because you get a little bit more out of it than you would out of your general fund.
Any other questions for Maggie? Thank you so much.
All right, we will stick around until you get through your resolution and provide you any other information at that time.
Actually, Maggie, we will be voting on the resolution for tomorrow, Wednesday.
Okay, sounds
And-
great.
And
We're just
all right,
going to
right?
discuss the figure.
Sure.
That sounds great. Then if
Right.
you have any other questions before tomorrow, please go ahead and just let us know. All right?
All right.
Thank you. And I guess I should say again, these are not what you're voting on for a resolution and setting a ballot amount is a not to exceed amount.
Right.
And that just means you cannot exceed what you vote on to put on that ballot. That means you can come in lower than that amount if you determine the project that you want to do is less money. If you determine what goes into the project ends up costing you less money, you can always issue less than what you set the ballot amount at. You just cannot exceed what you set the ballot amount at. You have that opportunity always when you vote or hold a public hearing. So,
Thanks again.
thank you.
All right, thank you.
So the 1.8 million was kind of a placeholder
That's correct.
to put on the agenda.
Right.
So we'd like to start discussion of principal amount not to exceed, as Maggie said, because it's written not to exceed. So,
All motion adoption.
I'll
okay.
second.
Okay, a motion by Sylvia and a second by Dottie to not to exceed the $1.8 million amount. Discussion.
I guess the question I have is just still with that estimate of the hotel revenue. I'm just having, I understand that it was backed in. I'm just having a hard time getting an understanding. I know they're conservative estimates, but there's obviously a range between the 1.5 and the 2 million, between about, it's about 500,000. So I don't know if anyone has additional insights in terms of that portion of it, or if Sylvia, if you do.
The only insights I have is I did access the pro forma that the developer submitted to the city, and it was a pretty rosy, pretty aggressive 100% occupancy rate at $120. And I was concerned that, in year one, are we really going to have 100% occupancy? That's a wild card. I didn't want to go in that direction, so I just I projected less than what the developer did. And I took a 50% or 60% occupancy rate, $110 a night, and created a pro forma that was much more conservative than those values.
Do you recall what theirs was? I haven't seen it in a while.
I don't recall, but I don't recall. In terms of their values, there were over twice as much, maybe in the 400 range, I want to say, 400,000, just in motel hotel taxes. And then what we're missing in the schedule is property assessment values. I mean, the assessor's office doesn't quite have a guesstimate to even work with, so it was up to us to work on comparables. And I'm like, that we shouldn't really be working in comparables. Let's work with what the residents instructed us to do, which is to use hotel motel taxes. And before we use hotel motel projections, in years 1 and 2, when the hotel is getting built, what other funding sources does the city have to tie us over? And the only other funds that I'm seeing around in the budget that are available is your local option sales tax, which has a general purpose use, meaning that for whatever lawful use the city can engage in, we should go for it. And that being the restriction, actually not much of a restriction, I thought it's prudent and it's protective of our community to use as many funds in years 1 and 2 when the hotel's getting built. Year 1, I don't know what shape the hotel receipts are going to take. Year 2s and 3, I would expect that hotel starts somewhat stabilizing in its, name recognition, brand recognition locally, and establishing its book of business, so to speak. So I thought it would be fair to use those values. Also, you need to, if any of these are a concern to you, keep in mind that valuation of the property taxes was about, I think, valued at about I can't remember. I can't remember exactly. It's about a little over 100,000 in property taxes coming from the hotel. So I thought that would be a good use of numbers for that. But I asked Maggie not to use property assessed values because even the assessor doesn't have anything at this time to work with, and I don't think that would be prudent for us to speculate. I think that's a bigger speculation than an occupancy rate. National occupancy rate, just so you know, is about 50%, or 60%, no, 50%, and I went just 10% higher than that, just because of the location. So with that in mind, I thought I thought these numbers are very conservative. And I'm sure Greg and Jim Glasgow are pretty disappointed that I use these numbers, but I have an obligation to provide as close to a conservative estimation of how this looks to our residents, because we are asking our residents to support this ballot measure on May 1, when this would come up for
I think
for voting.
100,000 property tax is very conservative.
Right. I mean, my website is the one that has all the details, and I can certainly access it. It's a little over 100,000, but
I thought it was almost double that. But I
according
think
to
yeah, I thought it was 200,000. And so I'm just
developer numbers, or
no, the property tax.
okay, my website, is that what you're looking at? So whose numbers are you using? Okay, so that's the development team's numbers.
Yeah, and I'm saying so
right.
100,000 is very conservative.
Sure, because it's split in half. It's 50%. Does that make sense for you?
200,000.
Okay. And you have the pro forma, right? And I know that pro forma was supposed to be submitted, so I think legal has it as well.
He's nodding his head.
Okay, good. All right.
I mean, so the next issue really is for voters, what they would think of the difference between 1.5, 1.8, and 2. If it's something that we want people to support, I think, odds of people supporting a lower number are probably higher than the odds of people supporting a higher number. But at the same time, I think it's good to, keep options open.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a big problem with the 1.8 as I know it was a filler, but kind of the the middle number in a sense. I just like that this is going to the voters to decide ultimately, and just it'd be nice in a sense if this was a multiple choice test for them to fill out rather than an up or down. But I understand it's an up or down, so so I would be fine with 1.8. But I'm curious to hear what others think.
Well, the impact on property, on individual property taxes between 1.5 and 1.8 is really negligible. I mean, I think that is the zinger that would touch most people. How much are they going to be hit up for this?
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I looked at it as it's like the cost of a subscription to a favorite magazine. You know, the ones you subscribe through the Girl Scouts when they knock on your door and they say, "Can you support my cause?" It's like $10 a month. I don't think a whole lot of people would object to $10 a month. Perhaps I'm hoping I'm not wrong on that, but I thought it was a 1.8 would be a safer value to work with. It's right in the middle.
I don't know if there should be more discussion on if we do go with the 2, for example, and we don't use it, kind of what that means. I think it means that the fees would be higher, but I guess in terms of the unused portion, I don't know if there are any insights.
Right. So how that works is the ballot measure could be 2.0, but if we were successful sometime in mid-June to not have to use all of the 2.0, we only go to market, which is to bond to the market for the amount that we need to commit for, which could be, 1.8. So although we've scheduled to the public and we probably have campaigned to the public on a 2.0 data figures.
Yeah, I mean, so the trade-off really is if we say 1.8, and that's, if that passes and that is sufficient, then that's fine. If it's insufficient, that's a problem. Or if we go with the 2.0 and it's the 2 million and it's looked at as too high and we have to go back to the drawing board, then the delays could be problematic. And
Oh,
that's how
very
I-
problematic.
that's how I kind of
We yeah.
We can't do that.
Yeah, we can't do that. This is why. I don't think we have to vote on this resolution tonight. I think we need to go into closed session to discuss this further. So,
But do we need to set the number tonight that we're going to have in the?
No.
No, I
We
don't
don't?
think so.
no. All we had to do was, well, for purposes of publication, we had to set a number. And I think closed session conversations would be helpful for this council. So I'm going to motion that we table this until tomorrow.
Okay, Sylvia motions to table. Let's have a second.
I'll second.
Second by Dottie. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. Okay, motion carries. It's tabled till tomorrow. And we have the agenda posted. And we have an 8 o'clock start.
We can change start. Well,
Yeah, we could.
not-
Well, what is it? It's almost 7. Okay, so we better so we have a start tomorrow at 8 p.m.
Well, actually,
No, can't we, since it's
yeah,
the
'cause it
same?
was up there before. So if you want to start at 7,
So we could, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so we could start at 7 or 7:30 or 8 tomorrow.
All right, sure.
Because we're keeping the number.
Oh,
we
okay,
should go change the start time on the agenda.
okay.
I figured you could.
We put an 8 p.m. start because of this discussion.
So for everyone, we have to, so for tomorrow's 24-hour rule for
Yeah,
posting
that's what we're
notices, that's
looking
what the technicality we're experiencing right
But-
now.
But we're thinking we can still start it at 7 since everything's the same except the time.
Right.
Correct.
The time
You're
to make
okay
any
with that?
final decisions tomorrow. Okay. That
Okay,
makes
so
sense.
it'll be a 7 o'clock start tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you,
Thank you.
John. And so let's see, we have everything there. So I want to open the public hearing for the FY19 budget. Would anyone like to speak? No one signed up to speak, but you can speak if you'd like. Okay, I close the public hearing. Steve Cool is here, and the council's going to talk about consideration of resolution number 1813, adopting the FY19 budget. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, thank you. This is the conclusion of the adoption of the budget for fiscal 19.
Can you turn the microphone a little closer to you? We can't really. I don't think it's making a difference, is it?
Speaks very quiet.
I can squat here.
Maybe,
That better?
maybe you can turn it. Okay. We got our housing inspector that does
okay.
microphones too. Thank you.
Okay, this better?
You just get a little closer.
Right up to it?
Perfect.
Right there. Okay.
I know. It's really close.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. To conclude the approval of the budget for fiscal 19, let's see, it's due to be filed, which I will file electronically by March 15th. And Chris has the packet of paper materials to file with the county auditor also by March 15th. Just a couple of things I just wanted to summarize. What's going to be happening in that year. First of all, the debt service levy is just a little bit short of $10.94 per thousand. Compares to just a little over $10.80. So it's about 13.5 cent increase from last year or this year. The budget itself is balanced. We have total expenditures of just about $2 million. Out of that, we have a $350,000 Olive Court project. And also we have about $470,000 of expenditures of the TIF receipts that are coming in. We have a large increase in that TIF receipts. We're looking at about $47,000 or $48,000 in this year. For next year, we're looking at about $475,000. So a significant increase in that. Like I said, we have the $350,000 Olive Court project. About $95,000 of that project will be paid by a developer contribution. The rest of that is set to be bonded at about $254,000 or $255,000. So, other than that, pretty much the same process as in the past. We had to do a little bit of trimming on certain expenditures, some planned items and so forth. A lot of the reductions in the expenses were scattered among several items rather than in the past where we were able to eliminate a street project or a repair project. So worked with Sylvia a lot to go through that and try to find everything possible to trim that back so we can get a balanced budget. So anyway, that's everything in summary.
And Steve, we just want to note to council and a reminder to our public that the areas that experience the most expenditure growth, and I guess the top three would be one, employee costs, so FICAs, IPERs, and all of our employee benefits. That's a component of expenses that continues to steadily climb. I'd say a lot more than just plain old salaries. The second area that continues to grow would be, I'm thinking of the expenses. I think it's that, and then the TIF rebate that we have to allocate right back to the developer. And is there a third?
95% of that
95% goes back,
developer.
right? So we see money in, and it has to go money out. So I think those are the top two expenses that are big in our budget for fiscal year 19. And that's where we see the most tension in the budget. But I do want to thank all the departments that were asked to look at last-minute contributions to try to close the budget gap. We looked everywhere. We were diving for 1,000, 500s, and $100 bills and down to $50 bills. So I think it's fair to say that Farmers Market received a cut. Even the community center programming received a cut. The tree board that maintains our trees received a cut. Street projects that were slated for compliance, like Americans with Disability Act received a cut, but nonetheless, we still managed to close the gap. And I want to thank Steve for his time and investment and explaining several things, because I insisted on wanting to do things. And I do have one outstanding item for the budget. We have a line item that seems to be locked, and we need to explore with bond counsel how to unlock that item so that the city can make use of it in order to take care of future gaps in the future. All right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Steve. Any other questions for Steve tonight? Okay. So,
I'll motion adoption
Okay,
of the
thank-
fiscal year through Resolution 18-13.
Second.
okay, motion by Sylvia, second by
Nick.
Nick.
Mhm.
Discussion? Roll call vote.
Moore. Maher.
Aye.
Casada.
Aye.
Herbold.
Aye.
Carried.
Okay, very good. Thanks again, Steve,
Okay.
for all your good work. And Sylvia, thank you.
You're welcome. My
Okay,
pleasure.
thank you.
Next is public input, and I'd like the public can come and speak. I have a couple people listed, and I know Francesca has to leave, Francesca Spencer, and we're not going to get to that item quite yet, but if you want to speak and tell council your story, that would be great. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Francesca Spencer. I'm a student at University of Iowa. I am family friends with Mr. Jim Lane, living on Highland Drive, I believe. And he got me a parking permit for Marietta Avenue. And about 2 weeks ago, I discovered that my car was towed because of the huge amount of snow. And I didn't know that this was an ordinance and that this was in place. And I also wasn't aware that my car was towed. So I didn't find out until Friday when it was towed on a Tuesday. And Mr. Lane graciously found out a bit more information about what happened. And they said that they phoned and emailed everyone who had a permit that they would have to tow the cars, but I never received any phone call or emails. And so I wasn't aware that I had to move my car anywhere else, and so that was kind of an issue for me, and it's a very stressful Friday night for me. But I was just wondering if there would be any way to get my towing charges refunded, and also I had a parking ticket for street storage despite my parking permit, and Mr. Lane said that I wouldn't have an issue with this street storage, I guess, policy. So that's...
I just want to ask you, did you get a set of rules of what the permit
I did not,
entails?
no.
Did you get a...
No, I
Because
just I
when,
received the
when
permit.
a permit is issued, I know the police hand out the rules.
Mm-hmm. I just received the permit.
You just received a permit.
Who did you receive the permit from?
Mr. Lane emailed it or mailed it to me and myself.
Okay, does council have any questions? We can't take this up right now. We
that's
have
fine.
to keep going, but are there any questions you want
Yeah,
to
you
ask?
said you parked your car on Tuesday and you discovered that on Friday it was gone.
Yeah. So
What's the gap in there?
So I had parked my car probably late January because I had really no issues with parking my car, getting any tickets or towing, and I'd parked it there, and then it'd been there for probably, I'd say 2 or 3 weeks, and then I learned that, like, after I had seen my car and got my car back, that it had been towed on a Tuesday, and then but I wasn't notified of it until I went and found my car not there.
So you park. So when you park it there, you leave it for a period of time.
Mm-hmm. Because I live in Burge Hall, and so it's quite a distance. I can't come every few days to move it or use it or anything. But Mr. Lane said that this wouldn't be an issue.
Have you gotten a notice ever about when you go to your car, do you get a notice of your car's been parked here, you need to move it or anything like
No,
that?
there was just the one parking ticket that I got also on the 13th, that Tuesday, that my car was towed.
Is your car parked there now?
Yes, it is.
And how long have you left it there?
I
mean,
moved
when
it,
did you park it there? Just out of...
I moved it back there, I think last Monday, and like a week ago, and I But yeah, last semester it's been there for most of the semester, and there was no issues with any notices whatsoever.
I see. And you've never gotten a notice on your car?
Never. No.
Just the ticket?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I would like to hand you a copy of the rules. And also, your car right now, I believe, has a sticker on it, and it would be towed tomorrow if it's not moved. Are you aware of that?
I did not know that.
There's a sticker now for...
Yeah.
And it's due to it's being parked there too long?
Right.
Oh, here. These are the rules.
Those are the
Okay,
rules.
very good.
Sorry.
You all get a copy of it. Maybe Steve needs it. Any other questions for Francesca? That, I think, has to go back down to Nick. It's a different sheet. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
If you can stay a little later, can you stay?
I can't. I'm sorry. I really have to go to
Okay.
work.
Well, the police chief will get a hold of you and contact
Okay.
you with the decision.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Quick question. Who is the named permit holder?
I am.
You are.
Yeah, I am. It should be in my name. My phone number and email should all be connected to the permit.
Okay.
And so how did you get the ticket then? Or your notice that you'd violated it, or when did that
Yeah, when I went to pick up my car from the towing impound, the ticket was still
Was there an officer's number on it?
I have the ticket with me, actually. I don't see an officer's number. I don't see an officer's number.
Reason?
It's
Okay.
Yeah, they have to be moved every 72 hours.
Well, that's not possible. She's
4 days later.
Oh, so you got...
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Francesca?
she lives in Burgess.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Now I have another person signed up. Oh, Jim Szymanski. Jim, would you like to speak to the council? Oh, maybe you signed up on the wrong paper. It happens all the time. No problem. I've done it myself. And so, would anyone else like to speak to the council? Okay.
Oh, we're wrong. Okay.
Okay, so where am I? Here I am. Okay, after public input, we have a housing inspector report. And Stan, I know, are there some people here that are interested in rental housing? Could you raise your hand? Are people here, do they know about these ordinances that are on the agenda? Have you been here before, or some of you new? Because I think it would be helpful to review some of the ordinances. Do you want to do it, Steve, or?
Sure, or whatever you'd like.
Yeah.
How about Stan?
So there's 3 ordinances before the council tonight. I guess to back up a little bit, not all the way, but a little bit. The legislature made changes to the law, prompted a lot of communities, including Iowa City, Coralville, Cedar Falls, Ames, most cities near University, and others, to take a look at their rental housing ordinances, because the legislative change prohibits cities from enacting or enforcing occupancy restrictions based upon familial status, a family or who you live with. And so the city of University Heights, through most of the last part of 2017, and then, since the turn of the year, I guess, from January 1 to the present, has been undertaking an effort to look at its ordinances, review options, consider different changes that might be effective to implement to get a handle on what have been some issues at times, and to forestall or foreclose what could become issues, all with a mind toward knowing that effective January 1 of this year, that occupancy restriction could no longer be enforced. And I guess I should say, since the city enacted its zoning ordinance in 1982, that occupancy restriction has kind of been the cornerstone of housing regulation, I guess you might say. Yeah. So, in the December of 2017, the council took action to make some changes with regard to defining a rooming house, making some changes, defining a rooming house and prohibiting a rooming house in the R1 single-family zone, making some changes to required parking at rental properties, and has kind of worked through a well-written and well-presented memorandum that Stan put together back in October and has been vetted and discussed at various council meetings, at some special meetings at which landlords or all citizens were invited to attend, special notice was given, and so forth. So tonight, let me back up a minute. So after further public hearings, discussions in December and January, the council directed the preparation of some ordinances that were then prepared in a draft form and presented in February. Again, further comment was received in February on those ordinances, and they were finalized from a drafting standpoint for tonight's consideration, tonight's meeting. So there are three ordinances before the council tonight. One is called Ordinance 223, and that ordinance makes changes to the city's rental housing code, which is known as Ordinance 110. And, you know, it's always a risk to summarize things, but I tried to summarize the changes in my legal report. And I guess I'll just go through that summary briefly here, unless that's too much detail. Okay. So there's a bunch of findings that the council makes here, and I circulated those so you could review them. I worked with Stan on those. Many of those are borrowed from or leaned on heavily from things that other communities have already enacted. Kind of gives the basis for the regulations that the city is undertaking. The definition of an owner-occupied home is changed only to include, you know, what the law calls natural persons. I don't know why the law calls things like that. People, you know, humans. So if I own a home, it can be owner-occupied because I can live there. If you know, ABC LLC owns the home and I happen to own the LLC, well, it can't be owner-occupied because ABC LLC is not a person. Okay. There's an exception made for trusts. So if people own their home in a revocable trust from an estate planning standpoint, well, then as long as they're the beneficiary of the trust, then that can count as owner-occupied. All right. Big change is to place a cap on rental permits in the R1 zone at 20% of dwellings that are in that zone. The council has talked a lot about this. I won't review all of that, but roughly speaking, there are 366 dwellings in the R1 zone, and I think there presently are 123 rental permits in existence, so that pencils out to be something around 34%, so it's already over that cap of 20. Council's talked a lot about that, and at the council's direction, then this ordinance includes, you know, what people would typically call kind of a grandfathering clause that says if you have a permit in the R1 zone, a rental permit in the R1 zone, as of the date of enactment of this ordinance, you're not subject to the cap as long as you don't have violations of the zoning code or other violations of other ordinances. You know, if you just go along the way you've been going along, you can keep that rental permit. Okay, as drafted, the ordinance ties that sort of grandfathering or that rental permit to the owner of the property, the present owner of the property, and so in other words, it would not follow the property. So somebody says, well, I've got a rental property now, and they put that cap on, but I guess I'm okay because you know, I've never had any problems with my property, so good tenants, I maintain it, I'll be able to renew my permit. The answer to that is, yeah, that's right. But if that person says, but then, you know, in 5 years I was hoping to sell it, and you know, I don't know what that's going to do to my value if the person who buys it can't then get a rental permit. This ordinance would not permit that next buyer to sort of renew a rental permit unless at that time of sale, the number of permits was down beneath the 20% cap. The ordinance expands the information requested by a rental permit application. The application itself has not been finalized, but information in the ordinance specifies, what will be asked for. I just don't have a form to show you, but I'll work with Chris and Stan to put together that new form. There's a clause that says you can't get a rental permit for property in University Heights unless you're really going to rent it. Probably not a huge issue just at the moment, but if there was a time where the number of permits was under the cap and somebody thought, well, I'll just get a permit now even though my family and I are just going to keep living here because then I'll kind of get into that grandfathering situation if we ever exceed the cap. That's not permitted. You can only get a rental permit if you're really going to have a rental. There's a whole new list and mechanism and process for rental permit sanctions. It borrows heavily from the City of Iowa City's rental housing code, and it provides for such things as, the sanctions are a reduced term rental permit, a suspension or a revocation. Suspension and revocation were already part of our ordinance, but I think the better parts of the new section contemplate code compliance meetings with Stan as the housing inspector and perhaps other city officials, police if it's a police matter, to sit down with people if there are problems and discuss them. I can speak from not personal, but I guess professional experience on this. Stan has mentioned this before, but when Iowa City imposed these regulations, 10 years ago, did you say, Stan? Yeah. Something like that. I remember thinking, well, you got to be kidding me. You're gonna have to go meet with the city, and well, how's that going to work, and the whole thing. And I have a landlord clients. Never comes up as an issue. Never comes up as an issue that involves me. They work it out. It's not as implemented in Iowa City, at least. I don't think it's an unreasonable process. I think it's actually a beneficial process. I'm not saying that you couldn't get people to disagree with that, but I don't think the experience in Iowa City has been anything like the negative outlook that lots of people had when the city enacted that. So the University Heights ordinance is going to kind of follow suit and implement a lot of the process that Iowa City has went through. So that's, yeah, so then the Board of Adjustment is authorized to hear appeals of certain things under the change to the zoning ordinance. And then the last two changes, one is there is a code section in the Iowa Code, little known, I think, that says that under certain, what I would call extreme circumstances, if a landlord doesn't provide water, sewer, electricity, that the city can enact an ordinance, which this ordinance is, that says then the tenant doesn't have to pay rent. It's just abated. Landlord can't come back later and say, well, I got the electricity going, so now I want to collect my rent from the time. It's just, you can't collect it. I don't know how often it would come up, but I think it's an effective tool for those extreme circumstances, and it's permitted by the Iowa Code. The last big change, I guess I would note, it's big in terms of a lot of lines, but because we replaced kind of the sanctions program in the ordinance, there's a lot of the prior ordinance that's just deleted as inapplicable anymore. So that's Ordinance 223. The only other thing I would say about it, I didn't say this at the top, but when I mentioned that a lot of cities have reacted to the legislative change, the legislature encouraged cities to react to the legislative change. It was, there was pushback to the change. There was debate that took them 2 legislative sessions over the course of 3 years, I think, for this to be adopted. And legislators said, well, look, if you have problems with issues, then enact ordinances that address those issues, but you can't do it by proxy, by saying we're going to have a restriction on residency or occupancy based upon familial status. Okay. That's 223. 224 is a shorter summary. It's the International Property Maintenance Code. It's adopted with specific amendments that I worked with Stan on. Mostly I did what Stan said, but I'll take credit. I worked with Stan on those, and they're specified in Ordinance 224. And then 225 is just sort of a companion to the part of 223 that says that the Board of Adjustment can hear certain appeals. Well, the Board of Adjustment exists and is created and empowered by Ordinance 79, zoning ordinance. So what 225 is just amends the zoning ordinance to say, okay, since now the Board of Adjustment is to hear certain appeals of housing issues, the Board of Adjustment has that authority. That's the summary.
Thank you, Steve. I didn't know when I said it's okay to go longer that it was going to be that long, but I appreciate it.
First time I've heard that.
And so we have first consideration of ordinance number 223 before the council.
I'd like to request that we set up 2 special meetings to further discuss these. These are substantial, big changes to the rental housing program, and I'm still working through the changes. I, as of right now, thought we had a different understanding from a prior working session where the permit holder had a different outcome than the one that our attorney just provided. So I would like to definitely have a working session so that counselors can discuss, debate, and finalize these ordinances in a manner that we envision best carries out the mandate from residents. So if there's
We have a moratorium in place on March 31st.
That's
that
right.
expires.
Mhm.
And that's my actually best week to meet.
Yep, that's
is
fine.
Starting March 26th on Monday, March 27th, March 28th, or March 29th.
I'm available that entire week. I can clear my schedule to make myself available for city business.
Does council agree they want to do some work sessions with this?
How
Do you-
many in that week are you talking about? Can we not extend the moratorium as I suggested in the last go-round?
My concern,
That we could,
my concern with that, Lisa, is that rental owners are possibly looking for new tenants come July 1. And that doesn't give them very much time to incorporate the new changes in terms of explaining to the people that might be inquiring about their property. I'm just thinking from the perspective of the rental property owner, that it might be an imposition, because I think usually as soon as students know, for example, where after the white coat ceremony, where they're going to be going for their internship or residency, or for law school admissions or whatever, they're looking immediately for housing. So I think it might cripple their ability to search for prospective tenants. So I would like to continue to have the moratorium on the end of March. I don't know how other people feel, but
so we're going to change this, have a work session, have a meeting to pass this,
We can make it a special meeting where you would,
where we pass it all in one.
we could, yeah, we'd have to collapse
we could.
1, 2, and 3 because we're left with no choice with a Saturday, the 30th, end of the moratorium.
Other than extend the moratorium. And I understand what you're saying, Dottie, but we've known about this how long now?
But we've also known when the moratorium was set for a long time. I think Mike has a question. Maybe.
Oh, Mike, could you be quick about it?
The one thing is, as far as
You need to come up here, but are you talking about the
Well, as
moratorium?
far as getting your rentals out already, people are already signing tenants for August. We start in January, or if not earlier. Sometimes they'll last till when the residents declare, law students get accepted and stuff. But we're already taking applications for tenants and stuff, and got the advertisement out. If you go to any kind of advertisement part, Craigslist or anything, it's full of it. It's a competitive market.
I see. Okay.
I don't even have a sign up.
I would also like to see the parking issues we talked about at last meeting integrated into this. I think my hope would be that we can give landlords a comprehensive, complete idea of where we
Stand.
see things going, so that we're not adding this stuff and then later adding other stuff. So my goal would be that if we can get that language worked up and integrated, then we could vote on that by the end of the month also. And something about, my comments on collapsing the votes, it's not something that I would typically want to do. But for the reasons mentioned, that, the match day or whatever it's called, I'm just hearing a lot about people needing, to the extent they haven't already, needing to know kind of what the rules are going to be. I think it'd be good to move as quickly as we can to get this done. That's my thought right now. I'm continue to try to hear from people if they have a problem with collapsing it in terms of what that issue would be. I know this has been debated for a long time. The things that we've generally been wanting to do have been out there for a long time. So I think it's a matter of just working through all the details and getting it done as soon as we can, so you guys know what you're getting into.
And Stan, do you know what parking issues is, do you want to?
Commercial parking, is that kind of?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
We had talked, I think, about the number 5 and 6 on the
Right.
chart, and then, the ideas of other parking issues that have come up, people parking in front of houses and,
And so
yards
on.
and that sort of
Right.
thing.
And then daily parking as well. So.
Commercial parking.
Yeah.
Right. We just
Yeah.
want to make sure definition and
Right.
scope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep.
Do you have other sticking points that you were looking at, Sylvia?
I'm concerned about the standard of substantial harm for the purposes of abatement. I mean, no electricity, no gas. Can you come back with some other proposals in addition to? I get that that's the base standard, but I want to do better than whatever the base standard is. I know mold was a real big issue 3 years ago. We had an entire family who had an entire basement area compromised with mold, and the landlord wouldn't pay for a chlorine bleach treatment. And I think you issued a flyer saying something to the effect as mold is to be expected, but come to learn about it that if you have asthma, if you have compromised health or an immune system, mold is very dangerous.
Absolutely.
And so I want to make sure that we are pulling in some medical reasons why there would be a necessity to abate and or negotiate with these landlords to
Or
remedy.
would there be a fine of
Sure,
some
but the
sort?
problem is in the state of Iowa, there is no standard for mold.
Yeah.
None whatsoever. And I can give you the state of Iowa public health forms that say exactly
So
that.
what do other states say? I mean, because I know Iowa City will look outside, right, to get some ideas. So what would any other standard be?
I can get you all the public health things, but the problem is in Iowa we have high mold counts outside and we can have high mold counts inside. So you have to look at it from a moisture standpoint. And even chlorine and bleaching that mold is not the permissible way to treat that. So
And it's very difficult to prove with medical evidence.
absolutely, thanks. So I think you have to be careful. Yes, you want to protect residents,
Well-
but you have to be
I get that. So I would appreciate having some background information to read on that. That would be superb.
sure.
Thank you.
Is that what other sticking
If I have
points?
any other sticking points, I'll email them to you.
Okay.
Thanks.
So, are you clear on the parking? Because I'm not.
The parking was 5 and 6 deals with allowing essentially commercial parking at residential properties.
Right. So, yeah, 5 talked about defining a parking lot as more than 4 spaces, and then 6 was restricting the use of parking spaces at rental homes to tenants and occupants only. And so is that what I hear the council saying? That's
Yeah.
what you want to see not, so it would apply to rental homes, but not to owner-occupied homes. That's another dichotomy that the council's discussed.
Yeah, I would like to be able to give landlords just a full picture in Ordinance 110, hopefully self-contained as much as possible,
Yeah.
so they can read that through and know these are kind of the rules
Whatever
that
it might be, I think, we would like to make it clear.
And let's start off, with that segment. I think that'll be helpful, because then we can draw for the general population as well.
I missed that. So we're going to single out the rental properties, but not the owner-occupied homes.
We don't know yet. We're going to discuss that.
I mean, my preference, I just would really like to get the rental part of it done, as soon as possible, and then move on to the resident, the homeowners, if as quickly as we can too. But this seems to be something that'd be good to put to bed. And I don't know if we had a little discussion at last meeting. I don't remember if there's anything else that was touched on, but I thought we had a good discussion before. I don't know if you recall, Sylvia. anything else.
I can. I'll have to look through my notes, but I know that that an evergreen, perennial issue was the parking, and we kept kicking down the can, but for good reason. I mean, we still had a whole lot more to go. If I think of anything else, I'll be sure to circulate it with council and let you all know. Not to start a conversation electronically, just to let you know what my notes say. But I certainly left with a different impression of that permit holding. I thought it would be transferable, subject to compliance. And maybe we just need to go back through the audio tape again, but I'll look through my notes.
Yeah, I have the impression that you've just reiterated, Steve. I have the same recall that is correct. You couldn't hear me?
That's fine. Working session, this is why we need a special meeting. This is a regularly scheduled meeting, and we're
I
not.
see three council
Yeah.
want to do a special meeting.
Yeah.
work
Yes.
session
Absolutely.
Yes.
type thing.
But we need to form quorum, so we need to make sure that if someone is unable to attend, they call in.
So that week of the 29th, I'm out that entire week.
The week of the
25th,
27th,
whatever
okay.
it is. Yeah, sorry.
It's in the middle of the week.
Can Abby step in?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. We're covered.
Or someone, might be
Or
Pat.
Tim, or I don't know. Pat, there you go. So the 26, 27, 28, 29, does that work with one of those dates work? How about maybe the
26 and 27 work best for me.
This is, March. The 22nd is Thursday.
It's Monday, the
Monday and
26th,
Tuesday.
Tuesday, the 27th,
Yeah.
Wait,
and then I move to April. That's not good. So, how about the 27th? Because it's a Tuesday. It's the
May-
26th.
I prefer not to do the 27th if possible.
Okay.
There's a school.
Okay,
event.
then the 26th of Monday, the
Yeah.
26th.
And then we could always do another date that week if we had to.
I can't do the 26th. I have something here that says can't schedule.
Yeah, I can't do the 28th
Can we do the
or
the 29th?
29th.
You know what? Let's go back to the 26th. Can we do an early item though? That's what I'm going to request.
Like 6 o'clock?
Yeah.
How's that work?
Or 5 o'clock, I don't care. Yeah.
Chris says no 5.
6?
6 is
Okay.
better. I mean, she has to go to job number 1 and not take vacation. 26th at 6. 26 at 6.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. That's how I remember things.
Go ahead.
So is that what I hear the council saying is probably I don't know if it matters really how you phrase it, except that you should definitely phrase it as a special meeting.
Absolutely.
But you're probably going to work through things, and then we can probably make changes up on the big screen and vote.
Right.
Take action
Yeah.
that night. Is that what I hear?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I had a couple other issues to bring
can
up
I?
too. at the
Can I?
appropriate
I'm
time.
sorry. Can
Yeah.
I interrupt? For a working session, do we need quorum for a working session?
No.
Well, I would
Well,
think so.
I mean, if you don't have a quorum, you're not really having a meeting. So,
But can you have a working session?
well, like I said, I mean, like 2 people can get together and
No, this would be 3 or maybe
well, that is
4.
a quorum.
That's a
Okay.
quorum.
Okay. So,
So, I
Nick,
mean,
you said you might be available on March the 22nd? Dottie, are you available the 22nd? And Lisa?
Yeah.
I'm available the 22nd as well.
March the 22nd at 7, which is Thursday.
Yeah.
So we have 3 people that can attend. Maybe not you, right, Lisa? Okay, so we have a quorum that can attend,
Okay?
Yeah.
and that's 2 meeting dates now.
Yes.
Correct.
Good.
March 22nd, Thursday at 7 p.m., and Monday, March 26th at 6 p.m.
and the
Okay.
same topics. I mean,
Yeah.
Yes.
generally. Okay.
And then I'm not adverse to collapsing the vote either once we work through.
Okay.
And
Are
then
you
March
available on
the
22nd?
26th.
Okay, and very good.
And then March the 26th, correct?
Correct.
March
It's
the
at
26th.
6.
Which is a Monday
Perfect. I just need to add
at
it.
6. 26 at 6. And 22nd at 7. So be sure and write that down, everyone. And
So I have a
Nick
cou-
said
yeah, I have
he
a-
had a couple.
Yeah. One thing is, I would like to have a discussion about, Chris has brought up that there have been some kind of close rental permit applications from before the moratorium. And I would like to have I guess, clear feedback to her in terms of, the status of those and just kind of how we might be able to clearly handle those without creating a slippery slope, but also potentially providing some fairness to people who, maybe were relying on heading in a certain direction with their, investment in the community or whatever the case may be. And Chris, I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you be able to maybe reiterate what you've said in the past in terms of these people who are kind of who were contacting you before the moratorium started, but that for whatever reason didn't complete the process of getting a rental permit for this year?
Sure. So I had individuals contacting me. They weren't going to rent this year, but they were going to rent this upcoming year. And they wanted to know what they needed to do. And at the time, there was no cap. There was no rental moratorium in place. And I said, if you're not renting at this time, obviously get your paperwork in for the next rental period. And now they're coming back to me saying, okay, what is the process to start doing this? And now I have to say to them, well, there's a moratorium through the end of March, and we currently are under discussions, and when I say we, I mean you guys, for a cap on the rentals in the city. So they are going under, the impression that everything was just fine and dandy, and they could start the process of getting a rental permit for the new fiscal year. I also have had contact with someone who is currently living in their home. It is a family home, and I'm probably going to get the years wrong, but it's at least 50 years old in the family. They want to keep it, but they have children in a particular school district that they're moving to. They would like to rent the home, and they are going to move back once the kids are out of school. So if they are unable to have a rental permit, they're very concerned that they would have to sell this family home because there would be no way for them to keep it because they need it to be rented. So there are some situations coming up that I think might need discussion by the council of how to handle.
Did we both speak to that lady? I mean,
No, this is a different one.
It's not the one
No,
that's
it's-
lived there for 48
No,
years.
that's a different
Okay,
address.
Because, okay, just checking.
So in terms of the kind of two topics you just raised, what do you think is the number of potential permits we're talking? Like 2, 4, 6, 10, something like that?
Definitely under 10. I'm going to say 5-ish, 6-ish range, 5 to 10.
And these were all before the moratorium. They were in contact with you.
And did they realize that they had to have that application in?
No, these are discussions that happened,
How long ago? Like
right. They've
2 years ago, 3 years ago?
No, I'd say within the past, not even a year.
Oh,
Let me ask a question. Obviously, these are property owners, right?
Yes.
Okay, did they get noticed that we were undergoing a moratorium? Did they get notice that we were, I thought everybody in the city should have received a notice at some point in time. Can you refresh my memory on that?
I would have to defer to Steve because I didn't send that notice out, so I'm
Okay,
assuming
Steve,
it was to everybody.
Was there, can you confirm who received the notices, when the notices were sent, and what the notices advised people that council was considering?
I don't know who received them. I know where they were sent, but and I can't tell you the date without looking here. But but
Just
yeah,
generalities
The
would be
general
great.
idea was that everybody. So there was a notice sent to every property address in town, to every, absent owner, you might say. So if the tax bill goes someplace else, and then to every property manager that's presently or was then presently identified, as an agent for a property in University Heights. Sometime last fall, informing them that there was a lot of discussion underway about various ordinances and to please come to the meetings if they wanted to be heard.
Okay. Did you get any return mail or any rejected mail?
I think we did. I usually keep it in a file, and I think I could probably find it.
Could you find it? And then, Chris, would it be possible for you to determine if any of the rejected mails were any of the people that you had held a conversation with, and maybe that could change my analysis? I don't know if it would be persuasive to the rest of council. And what do we know about the family home scenario? How many years are we looking at for these children to finish up in a school district?
I'm not exactly sure. I can reach out to the individual that I've spoken with. I'm not really sure.
Okay. I'm thinking we do have a safeguard in place that says that if you are a
Sabbatical or
on
something.
a sabbatical, you need to leave to temporarily leave or temporarily be away from your home, that you can come back. You can rent it in the interim, temporary rental, and then come back and either live in it or finally dispose of the home, so that we can return it to residential.
Well, the impression that I got from this gentleman, they do not want to sell the home. They were just under the impression they would be able to rent it and then come back to it. They've done a lot of work, a lot of renovation, and so they were very surprised when I said they were unable to get a rental permit and that there was a cap and the moratorium in place, or there
Okay.
would be a cap.
And again, these folks live in the house in question,
Yes.
and because they live in the house, they would have gotten the notice that
Yeah.
Steve is speaking about. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is I don't think they lived in the house until recently, while their home is in the other school district is undergoing a renovation, and it's a family home that has been sitting there after I think a loved one had passed away, and so my understanding is they invested money in it with the understanding they would rent it until their kids were out of school in the other school district, come back to it. So,
But they have a residence in another location.
correct.
So this wouldn't have been their family home per se.
It was their parent. The parent, I think, the parent had passed away. Yeah.
So the carve out, there is a carve out, just like Sylvia said, and it talks about it wrapping up an estate, and also there's a little catch-all, similar conditions that in the discretion of the council. So I think that situation, depending on timing, can probably be worked out from what I've heard tonight. This is the first I've heard of it, but I mean, I think
Depends on how
that's
long
what
we're
you have
talking.
that
Yeah.
for. The other ones where somebody said, hey, maybe I want to rent this starting next summer, what do I do? And the answer is, we'll come back as we get closer to the time, and in the meanwhile, the council changes some things. I don't think you're going to have an ability to kind of carve out exceptions there, and I think you need to know that.
Okay. So no go.
Does that help you,
Yeah.
Nick?
Yep.
Okay, anything else with rental?
No.
Okay, so.
I do have
go ahead.
one little question.
Yes.
Steve, the definition of owner occupied,
Right.
occupied by the owner in any of the following but no one else.
Right.
What about two sisters
Yeah, I mean, that's not
No, doesn't. fit.
permitted. I mean, if, as owner occupied under the current definition. And, you know, you gotta be careful what you do about familial status, because you can't regulate, you can't base your regulations on familial status. So,
I don't understand your question, your concern. Is it two sisters living together, or?
Dwelling occupied by the owner, as well as a dwelling occupied by the owner and any of the following, but no one else. The
Yeah.
owner's spouse, the children of the owner, or the children of the owner's spouse.
Mhm.
Don't we have some houses, I mean, am I missing something, Stan? We have some
If you had two
residents that have two sisters.
if you had two
They're
sisters
owners.
living, not necessarily that the second sister may not be an owner in that property. So
Yeah.
so that's something you
Family.
better take into consideration and give me some direction on.
one sister's the owner and she has a sister living with her. Yes. Or a brother.
And they have a rental.
Or a
permit.
brother
Doesn't
and a
have to be
sister.
sisters.
Right.
And then they have a rental permit, I assume. Yeah, so then so they have a rental permit. The new ordinance takes effect. They're grandfathered, so to speak. They get a new rental permit.
Okay.
It's just not owner occupied. And unless the council wants that to be owner occupied, and that's what I'm saying.
Unless
then-
both sisters on the title to that mortgage.
Which is the deed, yeah. That's the easy way too.
Mm-hmm.
That,
The deed, all right.
What is the concern, and I'm just throwing that, what is the concern if one of the sisters is the owner?
Yeah,
What is the concern about that being distinguished from, why do we need them to have a rental permit? And why do we need them to be
renters?
not owner occupied? Yeah.
well, they would need a rental permit under the current ordinance because the ordinance says if you're not on the deed, then you're living there.
You're not a
If there's
family.
anybody but a deed holder living at the property, then you need a rental
Now,
permit.
the
How about if they're not
sister-
paying any consideration?
Doesn't matter.
No,
The
no.
ordinance specifically says that.
Yeah.
Okay, then let's take care of that, because I already know of a situation. And it's, yeah.
Yeah. Owner occupied means what it says.
So you want that?
I think it needs to, I don't want to change the owner-occupied definition to complicate it with this one nuance. I just think we should carve it out and say, if you're a relative, why should you be a renter status?
Because
Now Stan
Well-
shaking his head.
Because you can't regulate unfamiliar
I've
status.
Well, yeah, and then it's more than that. In the past, when you could regulate on familial status, the idea was, I live in Des Moines and I buy a house here and I don't live there, but my kids do, and that's not a rental house because they don't pay me rent. And we said, well, it still kind of starts looking like a rental house to us because it kind of engenders some of the same issues, and they don't own the home, so we're going to treat that as a rental
Well,
property.
I want to distinguish the situation I'm speaking about. The person in Des Moines leaves Des Moines, they come and live in University Heights, and their sibling joins them. And now both siblings are living in the house, but only one is on the deed.
yeah.
And they're not, who knows about what the arrangements
there's
are
their
for
tenant.
paying bills or not. And we do have a couple of those situations. We have elderly sisters and
Yeah.
brothers who are living in our community that would be shocked to learn they're going to need a rental
Or
permit.
boyfriend,
Well, that's-
girlfriend.
First of all, that's not a change. I mean,
Yeah.
that's been for 20 years
Yeah.
almost, just so you know.
They can both get on
Oh,
the
with
deed
their-
and then there'd be no problem.
Yeah.
Well, but check your finances. You might get sticker
But,
shock
but,
with
but,
Medicare and.
I mean, I'm not, whatever the council directs is what I'll be happy
No,
to
I
do.
want owner occupied.
Okay, he says a small question.
Okay, Steve, is it my understanding that you cannot transfer ownership of an LLC?
No,
Under,
Of course you can transfer
Yeah.
ownership of an
But
LLC.
it wouldn't carry the rental permit with it.
That's true.
no.
Okay.
no.
I mean, as it's written. Yeah, in other words, you can't avoid the cap by saying, well, the owner didn't change. It's still Mike LLC. It's just that the owner of Mike LLC changed.
Right.
Yeah, you
Shareholder change.
can't do that.
Okay, does council have any more comments? Now, does Stan have any more comments or clarifications you want?
I've already sent the mold flyer out. You should have it in your mailbox. It was sent to staff and every email that I have for you, Sylvia.
Every email. Thank you, because I'm on my fourth email gap.
Okay, so we're going to Thank you, Stan, for attending tonight.
So
Yeah.
that's covering all. There's no discussion of any of the other items. The International Property Maintenance Code. There's still questions about that.
I did have a couple of questions. Stan, I'm concerned that some of this property home provisions are intrusive. Some of them are regulating activity that takes place inside of the home. And just from a pure enforcement perspective, do we want the government of University Heights and people's garages, people's living rooms and bedrooms? I'm of the opinion that if I want to store flammable things in my garage, I should be allowed to do so. It's my risk. It's my prerogative. Spray painting in my garage is my prerogative. And that was a bit disturbing. And I'd like to see a little bit more paring down of this International Property Maintenance Code to provisions that really do matter in transforming the vision that we're trying to get here with this new rental housing program. And the second thing I'd like to see is to do what some other cities are doing, and that is applying the International Property Maintenance Code to their rental program units first, and then depending on where they go next, they may apply it to their owner-occupieds. And my thinking is twofold. Number one, rental properties have a tax advantage to do repairs to the homes. They get a capital expense deduction, so they, for every door, every window, every roof that they invest in, it's a capital expense that they get to deduct as a business expense. Homeowners, on the other hand, may be tagged for making modifications or changes under this International Property Maintenance Code, and they have to make that expense out of whatever family household budget they have. They don't get a business tax deduction. And what I would like to see is a staggered approach to applying the International Monetary Property Code, so that hopefully when we have the hotel tax kicking in.
Stop. International Property Maintenance Code.
Yes.
Take the money out of it. There's no money, no monetary.
Okay, international, okay, you know what I'm talking about, the code, the property code, I'll refer to for short. I'd like to see us as a council hold a vision down the road where we try to position rental businesses on a similar footing with owner-occupied folks who don't have that advantage by the tax code to take a deduction on their expenses for fixing up. So I'd like to stagger application of the property code or property maintenance code, 3 years out, long enough for the hotel tax to also be generating enough cash so that we can offer incentives for people to fix up all of these property maintenance dings that are sure to come about, and we can put them on the same level playing field. Otherwise, ordinary residents are competing against business enterprises that have different tax treatments and different incentives that normal homeowners like myself and many of our colleagues here at the table don't have.
My concern is one of safety, and if the homeowner operates in any way that is unsafe, that would be a fire hazard or whatever, that infects the integrity of the entire community, I think it should be a level playing field and apply to everybody.
I just want to see this property maintenance code not turn it into an onerous, draconian program that's it's intrusive and there's no way of enforcing it, and I think it needs to be a little bit more reasonable. So I'd like to see
So painting in garages, anything else?
There's a couple of other provisions. I'd be happy again to pass them along once I get them, but
Sure. So the issue is if someone's painting in their garage, it's going to be on a complaint basis. So you're not
Right.
It's not going to be an issue until you have the neighbor kid who's spray painting his 1975 Nova with a spray can in your next door neighbor's garage on a continual basis. And I think at that point you're going to want to do something about it. You want to have a provision in there that says you're operating as a paint booth. We can't have you doing this. This is a fire hazard.
well, that's isn't that a home business?
If I'm spray painting my own car, no, it's
Well,
not.
So I want some reasonableness in this property
I
maintenance
think we
code.
have the reasonableness in the code.
Otherwise, I'm concerned that this is far-reaching, it's aggressive, it's going into areas that are, how are you going to enforce it? So why have rules on the book if we can't enforce them?
Maybe we
We
should
had this
continue this
conversation.
discussion
Right.
at the work
I
session.
would be happy to, so.
And so,
Mhm.
because it's apparently more complicated.
It is. It's much more complicated and just blanket adoption. I have concerns
I didn't
over
mean to
that.
cut you off, Lisa. Did you want to, okay.
And what provisions, living room provisions, were you concerned about?
I don't even remember. There's so many. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll talk at the 22nd.
Sure.
Okay? Thank you, everyone. And the next order of business is, on the agenda, is discussion of proposal to add a rooftop restaurant and underground parking to hotel project. And I see Greg Steltner is here and Jim Glasgow and Will. Remember? Will, hi.
Oh, hey.
Now you're going to have like no later than 9 o'clock. Can you do this quickly?
You bet.
Thank you.
Got Will Downing here from Rohrbach and Associates, and we've been working through the interior and exterior parts of the hotel. And
Just get real close to it, Greg, because you
Sorry,
have
you
to
bet.
talk very close.
no problem. We're working.
Thank you. Yeah, don't turn your head too much.
Okay. We were working through some interior, features, I guess, of the hotel. And then we were talking to some investors about, helping us because it's going to be such a big project. In the discussion, some of our investors came up with a rooftop restaurant idea. And we looked at it and we thought we would bring some concept drawings to say, hey, what do you guys think about the rooftop restaurant idea? So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Will.
Okay.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Mayor, Council, staff. We have some images of the design as it stands right now, and then leading into this concept of expanding to a rooftop restaurant, if that direction works. And just want to note that we have three-dimensional views of the exterior of the building here, and these are not renderings per se. They're colored to represent materials, but they're not photorealistic at this point. So first of all, just to orient everyone to the site plan, the triangular shape of the site, the railroad tracks is prominently diagonal across the street, and the placement of the hotel essentially parallel with the railroad tracks on the site, and then circulation around it. So this is the view, the design as it stands coming from the north, from Melrose. So as you can see as you approach, on the lower left would be some of the public areas, restaurant, so forth. And then next slide, please. So this is moving around to the west, and you can begin to see the entrance canopy on the center of the building on the ground floor. And next slide. Okay, so this is straight on at the hotel from the southwest, looking towards the main entrance. And then again, main entrance as you're circling around. So in this view, this view is from the east, looking at the hotel, and you can see the restaurant portion to the right and the rooms. The elevation view from the northeast. Finally, a little close up on the restaurant portion, and on the right would be where the swimming pool would be located. And moving in for some close-ups on that outdoor seating area. And then back towards the pool. So then this is a rendered view, more or less, so using the computer to create a more photorealistic impression. So then moving on, this is that same entrance view, but representing what would be an additional level for a rooftop restaurant. Moving around, again, there's an aerial view indicating at the left would be the service area, the center in glass facing to the east and north, indoor dining area, and then on the right of the upper portion, potential outdoor dining area. And a close-up of that outdoor area. And then finally, a view from the roof level. This is from an aerial camera, a realistic view of what you would see from that elevation looking to the north, the prominent view towards the University Hospital and, of course, Koenig Stadium. So this elevation indicates the heights of the building. So what's currently proposed is 60 feet. Well, 65 is the limit of the ordinance. Current building is 60 feet, so we're 5 feet below the ordinance. The next level would be proposed at 72 feet, so really just 8 feet above your current ordinance. So
8 feet above the 65.
above the current ordinance, so
Of
roughly
60.
this much taller than the ordinance would allow currently. And this is a view from the southwest, so facing towards into town from the hotel. So you can see what's proposed is the additional level would have no major openings on it, so therefore no light spillage, no windows, no noise from that level towards the residential parts of town as well. I think there's just one more view available. Yeah. Or not. Yeah. Probably go back to the overall aerial view, please. Right. Back one, please. Right there. So that's really the scope of the concept. Oh yeah, thanks, Greg. Mounted above the dining areas and the service areas are the solar panels, are indicated, shown on this drawing, for solar photovoltaic electric generation as a amenity on the rooftop of that additional level. And they'd also serve in the dining area as a shade structure over the outdoor dining area.
So does that take up the whole space? It doesn't look
It
like
does
it
not
over
take up the whole space. It's actually inset from the perimeter, approximately 10 feet
inset.
around. The only place it begins to approach, go to the next slide, please. At the outdoor dining area, it gets within about 6 feet of the edge of the roof. So it's still inset to reduce the visibility of it from below, and also to provide a buffer for safety for rooftop outdoor occupants. But the building level itself would be brought in from the perimeter, so it would not be a full story over the rest of the building.
How many feet tall is the glass?
The glass portion of the building, the overall.
Just that glass wall. Is there a glass wall on for safety?
Yes, the guardrail.
Yeah. How tall is that?
Oh, it would be a minimum of 42 inches per code, but likely 48 inches for additional safety level.
So that would not have glass. Like the downtown rooftop deck has glass. Does it have glass up there? Do you know?
Around, talking about the View restaurant, portions of it have glass, but that's more of a windbreak from the north.
Oh, okay.
On that one, but to the east, yeah.
And does there? I should have brought a pointer. Does this area right here that goes back to the community that's open back there? Is that going to allow?
He has a pointer. He has one.
Yeah.
Is that going to allow? Right there. Is that going to allow light and noise to go back toward the community?
Well, there aren't any light fixtures in that area.
Oh.
They would be back underneath the shade structure of the solar area.
What is that space for, right? Why is that open? Right?
It's roof. It's setback for visual buffer. So that is simply rooftop.
But would you use that area?
No. And then that white structure is the exit stair that comes up from below.
It's the what?
This exit stair.
Oh, okay.
That's the way out in case
Like
of
the
emergency.
elevator?
Elevator is in the center of the building.
Okay.
Here, I can point that out. So
I know, I need help.
right here is the location of the elevator, and that relates all the way through the building, of course. This is a stair that goes down to ground.
Oh, a stair.
and there'd be a stair down to ground. at
And those
this
are required by
area.
code anyhow, right?
Oh, absolutely. 2 stairs minimum.
Minimum, okay.
Mhm.
So 2 stairs minimum, they go through the center of the hotel and on the edge of the hotel. Okay. I had a question. It looks to me like a really expansive solar paneling system up there. Is that the whole length of the proposed restaurant? Or what can you?
What we're showing is solar across the entire length of the restaurant at this
Yep.
point.
And where is the restaurant? Is it all underneath all the solar?
This area here that's opaque would be the service area, i.e. the kitchen, restrooms, the things that don't necessarily need a view out.
Okay.
Then the dining area and host area here, and then outdoor dining here.
And from this relationship, where's Olive Court?
That would be parallel with this line, but about 300 feet to the west.
Okay, that way.
Yep. So that area there is the south property line. This is the west property line.
Okay.
And so you're looking essentially due south from the university campus.
What sound and noise emissions are you guys thinking about?
Well, the interior space would be enclosed essentially, so there would be little sound coming out of the dining area. If there were outdoor occupancy, there would be the sound of speaking and talking out there.
How about music and things like that?
Well, that could be a matter of ordinance about whether or not amplified music would be permitted.
Oh, okay.
But you might see a minimum of ambient music, like most restaurants have.
How many square feet is this restaurant total?
We have approximately 8,000 square feet on the rooftop level.
How many tables do you think, if you know, would that involve?
Well, from the 8,000, there's about 2,000 to 2,500 square feet in dining or in service area, so leaving about 5,000, 5,500 in seating, divided by 15 square feet per occupant would be the building code maximum occupant. So I have. And that would be essentially the packed ballroom situation at 15 square feet. So mostly a dining room would be somewhat less than that.
5,000 divided by 15 square feet.
And do you know the measurements of that 5,000 square feet? I mean, the feet? No, you might not. But
The length and width?
Yeah, because I know the building itself is 75 feet wide.
Right. And minus the 10 feet on the west side. So you've got roughly a 60-foot wide dining room by probably 100 feet long. So there's your roughly 6,000 square feet minus service area.
Are there, what about the underground parking? Can you get quickly to some of that?
I don't have an illustration of that. It's not much to look at, but we can talk about it.
Yeah, obviously
I mean, that's on your
pardon me.
agenda.
If we need, I think there's a code of 150. Let's see, what was it? I think it's 150 per 150 square feet is one parking space. I think it's a code. So we would need some extra parking spaces because the hotel's 140 rooms and we have 156 currently. So we would need some extra parking spaces. So we thought we'd try to put some underground parking in, but we'd have to take away some of the upper parking to get a ramp in type thing. So we would need extra parking, and we would. So I think the ordinance currently says 156 spaces off-street parking. So we just want to move that one number up to 200. So you would say
4 more.
What's that?
44 more, is that the math? Will says yes.
About 200. So it's
Yes.
200, I'm like.
Yeah, so.
Off-street?
What's that?
In off-street, 44 new?
Yeah, off-street new parking. So.
So what was that? Some of that's underground, I just don't understand.
Yeah.
Or is that?
So it's So the ordinance says off-street parking, so I would assume underground or above ground. The ordinance doesn't really say, so I don't know.
But so how many underground would you be?
We could add what we figured 30 spaces, but I think nine above ground would need to come out.
36? 30, I'm sorry.
So we could add 30 underground, but nine of the ones up top would have to come out to access the 30 underground. So essentially 21 spaces we could get underground.
That's the most you can do underground, or is that?
Yeah, because of our laundry room is in the lower level.
30
the
or
pool,
21?
right?
What's that?
And the pool, too.
Yeah, the pool,
30 underground.
Is
so
it 30 or 21?
21 underground.
21. 21.
Gain of 21.
Oh, a net gain. I gotcha.
Yeah, because we have a pool area that's kind of one end of the building, and then we have the laundry room. That's another part of the underground.
So you're proposing to have 30 spaces underground and how many above ground?
Possibly up 15 or 20 additional rate.
So I would say 170.
And you're at 156, and you'd say 170 maybe.
Yeah.
And
Above ground.
above ground.
I mean, all we're trying to accomplish is adequate parking. So for the restaurant area.
Is that for code concerns?
Yeah,
that
it's
you
like
have?
150. The code is 150 per one parking spot per 150 square feet
Okay.
Of dining room.
of dining room.
Okay. And so what did you want to ask the council about this?
Oh, if there's any indication of,
You have to
acceptance.
start tying this
Yeah,
up.
yeah, no worries. Just thoughts about if it's a good idea, bad idea, because we're right in the process right now of finalizing our drawings. And once we get our drawings finalized, we want to push forward to building the hotel. So at this point, if we're going to go with this, then we need to put a third elevator in. We need to work on the plumbing. We need to work on a lot of other things. So we'd like to kind of get that going. If the council is open to the idea, then we would kind of have some indication of that.
Greg, I have a couple of questions for you. The PUD agreement says that the development team has to bring in a number of amenities for the city. One of them was a swimming pool, and that's included, right?
Yes.
Access to community conference rooms, I think that's included as well, right? Access to the facilities for exercising. And then the fourth item, a coffee shop as well. And the fifth item is that we have to have a restaurant. So what's the difference between this proposal and the drawing on the first floor, the restaurant on the first floor? Will this hotel then be having two restaurants or one restaurant or?
Yeah, the current restaurant on the lower level on first floor is a restaurant that is Marriott standard courtyard restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And Marriott has added a Bistro 2.0 menu, so it's a lot bigger menu. It's a really nice menu. I've heard a lot of compliments about it. It's really nice. So this restaurant the Rooftop restaurant would actually be more of a chef style where you have your own chef, and the restaurant in the lower level would be more of a prepared food type restaurant, not.
So more
you'd
like
have-
a
you'd have
corporate
someone-
restaurant.
Yeah, corporate restaurant. So you would have someone a prep type restaurant versus a chef type restaurant. That's the only way I can explain it.
Okay. I'm appreciating it as a
Yeah, no.
corporate restaurant.
Sure.
You're told what to prep. You
Mhm.
can't create locally or your local menu or whatever. Okay.
So who would run the restaurant on the rooftop? Is that something you would lease out to someone, or you?
Yes, we would. Jim and I talked about this. We'd actually like to kind of talk to people in the community and lease that space out.
Hmm. Is that what the View does right now?
I don't know. Do you know?
I believe so.
Okay.
I don't believe it's a corporate standard.
Are there any ideas you have in terms of scale of this? Is there anything that can be scaled down, or is this kind of the minimum that it needs to be to work for you guys? Or
Well, one of the reasons we made it the way it is right now is because of the two access. You have to have two of egress stairwells. So we made it kind of that big because we're trying to hit both stairwells. That was one of the reasons it kind of got as big as it is. It doesn't need to be that big. I mean, if you wanted to scale it down, we could. It's not. We're open to that part.
just one of my concerns is that adding the additional parking spaces outside. I like the idea of them underneath the building. But that's one of my concerns. And then just, the typical concern about how much traffic this would generate
Right.
compared to what we were expecting already. I assume you'd get some business from the hospital, people walking over. I assume you'd get non-peak hour drivers potentially for the restaurant also. But the traffic on Melrose is just another concern.
Yeah, we're
Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
just between me and Jim. We feel like this is a great opportunity to offer to the city. We think it's a great amenity to offer the city. I think if it's something you guys are interested in, we're happy with that. If you're not, then we're not gonna, try to push it. We're just gonna say okay, and that's okay. So this is something we thought because the view is getting so much publicity and everybody talks about it, and that's what our investors started throwing at us, saying, hey, why aren't you guys doing this? You guys are got the, So we thought, okay, well, we'll see what get a temperature reading on the community and see if they want it. So that's kind of what we're here for.
Greg, I haven't been to the View, but does it have outdoor seating like
Yes,
this?
it does.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, that area that I was pointing to before, is there a reason why there couldn't be a wall there? I just am concerned about noise and light.
Easily
Concerned about noise and
Yep.
light going back to the community.
easily be a wall there for sure.
And all you're asking is just 7 more feet?
8 feet, actually. It's
Eight
7
more feet?
Yeah, 8 more feet.
8? Wow. Okay.
That's it.
That's it.
Because we're already below them.
You're already below,
We
so
didn't-
you just need 8 more.
Would council be interested in, I know, more questions need to be asked, and I'm concerned about the time. Would council be interested in a work session to discuss this further, or what would you think?
What is your timeline where
Yeah.
you need to know?
Well, it really, if you guys, we want to start breaking ground in no later than May. So if you guys think this is a good idea, then that might push us to June. But the longer we wait, the longer it's going to take to get the project started.
I'm really concerned about valuation, so the county assessor's office will be looking at their property January 1 to see how much completion is made, and they get a pro rata tax bill based on that. So I'd really want to make sure that you guys are breaking ground. If all we're left is with the corporate menu, then
I mean, we can go quickly. I mean, these guys we met with them yesterday, and told them we wanted to do a rendering on a restaurant, and they did this in 24 hours. So.
But an answer by like April, meeting would be
because
premier.
everything's gonna. I mean, we're like ready to get our finalized plans done right now, and at that it just happened. So at the same time, our investors were saying, "Hey, what are we missing here?"
Yeah.
And so we stopped the architect and said, "Hey, let's look at this. I had another idea," and that's why I reached out to everyone and said, "Hey, what do you guys think?" Just trying to get a temperature reading on if it's a good idea or not.
Did you hear the dates of those other meetings that we just set up?
I know they're here.
The
left
22nd
in
and the
later.
26th?
Yeah, that's fine. I can make anything work.
Well, and also the meeting in April, our council meeting is the second Tuesday, so we would have time in April also
Right,
before the meeting to meet.
So you're thinking some during the work session?
Well, I just didn't know if, to keep it moving, I don't know that it'd be a huge commitment of time for them at that point, just checking in at that next,
Well, we could do it in April, like the first week in April.
I say we handle this through the working session.
I don't think we're going to have time.
I say we should try at minimum, because
Well, I mean, give 'em a
they really
certain
need to
amount of
break
time.
ground. They need to finalize by when, May? Because you want to break in
Well,
June?
But I was suggesting an answer by April.
Oh, an
we-
answer?
Yeah, we should be able to give an answer, I would think.
For 7 feet?
Yes.
8 feet.
8 feet.
8 feet.
And
Hey,
parking.
I just thought a check-in might
And
be good
parking.
in the next.
But I think the 22nd is a good idea, or the 26th, so we don't have more and more meetings.
Right. I'd like to just tag it along, if we could.
The,
I'm worried about them breaking ground and getting some completion done by the end of the year for the assessor.
We could still have an answer by the
Folks,
meeting
we
in
just
April.
looked at our financials and,
Steve
Yeah,
wants to
that's what I'm saying.
speak a minute here.
So to accomplish what is proposed would require a zoning change for the height and some other things, and then an amendment to the development, approval of the development application would require an amended application and then approval. The development application approval can happen anytime on, 24-hour notice, just like anything else the city does. But the zoning change requires a published notice. So I need to know, a couple of weeks in advance when you want to take that action.
And then it has to be at a regular.
And it has to be at a
council
regular meeting,
meeting.
yeah.
So it probably
So
is wise to meet early.
So April.
right, so that 22nd and the 26th makes sense, so that we can be ready for an ordinance modification, if at all,
that's the way you
if
go.
it goes
Yeah.
in April.
Yep.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to invite you to the March 22nd meeting
You bet.
and possibly the 26th.
Yeah,
I mean, we'll see.
placeholders, right.
Okay, thank you
Great.
very much.
All right.
Do we need to take a little minute?
Yeah, let's
break?
do that. I'm
I
running
Jim's
out of
got
water.
one-
Take a little break.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Jim, you want to speak?
Yeah, I was just going to say a few things. Greg and I are both completely okay with whatever the council decides. If you sense the community doesn't want something like this, or you think it's a great idea, fine, we'll pursue it. But just from a logistical standpoint, we have to add another elevator. We have to run up a grease interceptor for the restaurant, and then we have to run piping up to the roof. We have to accommodate bathrooms up on the roof. So from my standpoint, just structurally, there's a lot of things that we need to accomplish. So
Can I ask you another question, Jim?
Sure.
I forgot to ask this of Greg. My apologies. How much does this increase the value of the project?
Well, my guess is the shell, when Greg and I would do something, we would put up the shell, and the shell would be available to somebody in the community or a restaurateur.
Mm-hmm.
That shell, my guess, is going to be somewhere between $1 million to $1.5 million. The restaurateur will probably then spend another $1.5 million, maybe $2 million, to do the interior of the restaurant. So the assessed value of the restaurant would probably, or of the building would probably go up $1.5 million or maybe $2 million, something like that. So
That's more than a 10% increase on a $10 million project.
yeah, well, there's about a 10% increase, I'd say,
Okay.
of the overall project.
Okay.
And it's the way we've structured this building so far with concrete and precast, it's no problem holding the restaurant up there. I mean, that's one of the nice things about this is we can just
Structurally
put
sound.
it right on top. It's the stairways and the elevator and those other type of things that were something we'd have to blend into our project at this point. And we're at the point where we've just turned in the plans to Marriott for approval. So once we get those back, we'll get their comments, and we'll probably be about ready to go. I think in the next month or two, but it wouldn't be a big issue to add this. And from what you were saying, Nick, as far as the size of the restaurant, yeah, we can pull it in. There's probably going to be a size that a restaurateur would want, which my guess is in the 4,000 to 5,000 square foot range of seating area, and some outdoor patio area. The walls and the glass and all that, could accomplish probably the sound deadening. It's just, again, for us, it's does the community want it, and that's what you have to tell us, I guess. So,
Can you
what
bring
we-
a sample of that corporate menu?
well, actually, the one we have at Spring Hill Suites is pretty good, but it's like pizza. I mean, flatbread pizza and
Sandwiches?
I
don't know.
well,
Salads?
yeah, sandwiches. Yeah, there's some salad. Yeah, like a Caesar salad type thing, and everything I've eaten there has been pretty good.
Paul
So.
has a question.
Yeah,
back
Paul.
there.
Paul Moore, Thousand Mills Avenue. I recently spent a month in Arizona, and I basically stayed in Marriott Courtyard.
Can you come to the podium?
It's not a simple question.
It's a comment, yeah.
Basically, they're a super quality facility, and as far as the bistro, they served breakfasts, which was kind of a diverse menu. Then they were open all day, but basically for drinks and snacks. And then at night, and I think it was mentioned here that they were going to have another bigger room beside the bistro that can have a separate dining room. They have separate seating with a shell where two people can sit, and then there's individual TVs, or it can be used as a work area with their computers. And not that I was spying, but just these are things that I observed, and they're a quality place. And I learned another thing, which may or may not have anything, but when they have a Marriott, then they have a Springfield connected to it in an L. And the reason they do that, they can share the swimming pool, they share the laundry, they share the kitchen, and they share the exercise room. Pretty smart.
Yeah, and this was in Arizona, right?
I just was there for a month, but this is what I found.
Super. Good due diligence, Paul.
Anything else?
Okay, I don't. Yeah. Any other questions? I think that's.
No.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, we'll be at the meeting and we can present more. Any other questions you have, you can pass on to us and we'll try and answer them.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break right now. 5-6 minute break. Lisa's right there too. So we're going to go ahead, and I have the mayor's report. I have a pretty popular report this month, and the comprehensive plan review. I got 3 council members to volunteer, Sylvia, Dottie, and Nick. And I want to give some choices to council. This is for a working session, so I don't need a quorum, but I don't want to leave anybody out, and it's to start the process and to review questions from Kent. But what we can do is we either keep the work, the 2 of the 3 people, and continue with the early process of a working committee, and then meet with Kent and review some of the things, and then bring it to a work session or a city council so everyone can comment on it before it goes out. So we can do it either way. Or we can have the council, just have him come to a council meeting or a work session and go over with everybody at that time.
I think it would be more effective to work with him closely at first and then bring it back rather than bring him in to, it would be too general, I think, because we're going to be dealing with a lot of
Okay,
detail.
so we need just 2 counselors then. So
Well, I volunteered, so.
I know, well, we have 3 council who volunteered. And so I need to if we do it that way, I need to eliminate 1. And then, and you're not volunteering to be eliminated?
No.
And,
I'd say let's just have a work session.
okay.
That would be
Are you
fine.
thinking a work session would work? Have him come, because a council meeting, it could take up to an hour, I would think.
Well, we're already at 2.5 hours right now. Yeah. So I would be happy to share the work. It's a big task, and the more eyes on it, the more valuable our output is going to be. I'm also concerned that once we do MPOJC, once it's gone, it's gone. There's no pulling back and saying, oh, I forgot to add this issue. it's gone. And I'd rather have more eyes on it. And if it means we have to, as counselors, take up more of our personal times outside of a regular scheduled meeting, then so be it.
So you want a working committee?
We can do that. If we don't need to have quorum.
but I don't see anybody wanting to. I see three counselors
but
wanting.
You said a working session, which is
Yeah.
outside of the regular scheduled meeting.
Right.
So, and if we don't need to have all 4 counselors or 5 counselors on board, if 3 are good enough, I say we have quorum and let's keep moving on the issue.
But when we have a quorum, we'll have a meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a working committee of 2.
That's fine. So in order to
And
not
I hear that's what
exclude.
Nick wants.
Yeah,
is-
so in order not to exclude anyone, let's just have a working meeting where we don't vote on any agenda items out of courtesy to the non-participating members.
Well, how
And-
do we bring?
Will we bring it back to a general meeting?
Yeah, we can
Okay,
bring it
so
back
we
to
won't
meeting.
bring JC.
We'll bring them into the working session.
But our
with
scope
everyone.
but our scope of direction will be already settled pretty
And
much
if it's
by then.
3 people, it's 3 people.
Yeah,
And then we'll have a finished product ready to go and go through the process as a group rather than 2 working.
Yeah, my concern is that we bring the issues of University Heights to JCMP. That, that they not direct us, so to speak, that we work, this is our comprehensive plan.
Right,
And we're
right.
just reviewing it and renewing it and improving it.
Mhm.
So,
A lot of cities are doing that.
I think, I'm concerned about these general work sessions really getting down to the nubby detail of it. I think it would be better if 2 by 2 would work with him or down and then bring it back. You see what I'm saying?
Is that a possibility to have one meeting with him, have 2 of us, the other meeting?
Yeah.
The other 2?
He said he would do whatever the council.
So we could do it that way. We could do 2 by 2.
I understood this was supposed to be this was supposed to be soon. That's why I didn't follow.
I don't think there's any urgency to it. I just think we need to really look at the details so that, everybody's comfortable with it because it's the community, it's not just.
Okay, so
I would be fine having 2 meetings of two,
Yeah.
if that works with them.
Okay, so maybe I'll check the schedule, but I think 2 can be during spring break, and then maybe 2 after spring break.
Whatever, just, whatever you want.
I think we could email about that probably since that's private community.
Okay.
Paul has some
I'll tell him
comment.
that. Oh, Paul, you have an idea?
With these work sessions, could I be included?
Sure, they're
Sure.
public meetings. Now, this works.
A whole list of things, some positive, some negative. Few people aren't aware of what you're doing with this process. And so, Dorothy mentions the nitty gritty. These are things that have been brought up before and laid out that this is supposed to be a comprehensive plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really, really worried about public safety and sidewalk crossings
Mm-hmm.
that you're eliminating and things like that. Beautification, the heck with it. It's gonna be covered with trash. We're gonna have sand every place like we do now in the wintertime. I want the public safety to be number 1. Bicycles and traffic on down the list. But you don't realize we're trying to encourage people to walk and ride bikes and things, but we're actually making it more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've got a number of pages of notes that keep popping up in my head, and I add some every so often. I'd really like to be involved in this work.
Well, if the council meets 2 by 2 with them, then they'll come to a meeting or a work session and present it, and go over it with everyone.
And it all kind of,
Few people to be informed
Right.
Right, so
Yeah.
that the public can
Yeah.
comment too.
And then it all kind of is incorporated in the Melrose scape too, which is part of the visioning thing as to how we broaden the roadway and how we provide bike paths and that kind of. It's all part of that. So that's why JCP or whatever is, an integral part of it. But we need your input in order to formulate the things that need to be changed.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, I'll report that, and then we'll get back with some dates. Okay, then RAGBRAI is my next thing, and it's been announced an overnight stay in Iowa City. Probably everyone knows that. It's Friday, February 27th, or July. Thank you. And a few homeowners have already requested overnight bicyclists, and I have a resolution on the
18-17.
agenda.
I motion to adopt.
Second.
Okay, motion by Sylvia, second by Nick. Roll call vote.
Maher,
Aye.
Casada,
Aye.
Herbold,
Aye.
Moore, carried.
Okay, and then the zoning commission. Larry Wilson submitted his resignation effective March 23rd, and he and his wife Mary will be moving out of town. And I want to thank Larry for his many years of outstanding service to the city of University Heights. Both Larry and Mary will be missed. And then I'd like to ask if anyone's interested in being appointed to the zoning commission to contact me, and it'll come to the council at the April 10th meeting. Let's see. So consideration of 1818 is deferred until April. And then discussion and approval of recommended raises for city staff and police. And when we're audited, we have to have this on the agenda, and I wanted an approval. And last month, Nick went over the salaries for the police. And does anyone have any questions about them? They were effective immediately and on the current budget. And then the other staff, if you don't have questions on that, the other thing is the city treasurer and the city clerk. And the last time they got raises was 2 years ago, and that's how it's been going, either 2 or 3 years. And so Sylvia and I sat down and kind of went through some of these, and we used the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, and recommended Lori have a 2.1% for July 2018, and she'd have a 36-cent increase per hour, and then Chris would have a 2.1 raise for July 2008, and it would be a 33 cents per hour raise. And I talked with Stan Loverman, and he's currently making $600 per month, and he said with all these changes and everything, he'd like $750 per month. And they've been incorporated with and I think we probably, in the budget, I think we ought to have a motion and a second. Is that what you need for the auditor? For the salaries, or, discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second, okay. Motion by Nick and second by Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Okay, motion carries. And then the 2 days to mark on your calendars is the cleanup day is Saturday, April 21st from 9 to noon at Marietta in the usual spot, and we'll have more information.
Oh, wait a minute, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Salaries are effective when, immediately, or for
Just the police are.
just the police? Yeah, because it's the next
The
budget.
other ones are
Right.
July, they said July 2018.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then, thank you. And then the citywide garage sale will be held Saturday, June 2nd. And so then we'll go to zoning commission. Pat.
And just 4 points as a follow-up to the ULP presentation. First of all, as Steve mentioned, it will require a change in the zoning. And so the second point is it's just 7 feet, it's just 8 feet. But, you know, this kind of mission creep is something we saw happen with OUP. They come in at something and then they up it up after they've gotten the commitment. The other two things were I did listen to the tape of one of your December meetings when the parkland dedication was brought up, and there was a lot of points made about how much green space had to be preserved, and obviously the increased parking is going to reduce that green space. Lastly, and I think most significantly, the entire traffic study was based on a representation that this would not be one of these destination hotels. And so I think that before you approve this change in the scope of the project, you really ought to go back to MPOJC and ask them to rerun the numbers on the traffic impact that this would have if you have a large restaurant of this sort at the top of the roof.
Thank you, Pat. Any questions for Pat? Okay, we'll go next to the legal report.
So there are two things that come up annually, and they come up this month. So the first is Resolution 1815, which renews the 28D agreement with the City of Iowa City for transit services. The contract price is $38,299, which is an increase of 2.2% based upon CPI or dollar amounts. It's an increase of $677. The remainder of the terms of the contract remain the same. Excuse me, I've reviewed them and they're acceptable. So Resolution 1815 is before you.
I'll move to approve.
I second.
Okay, motion by Dottie, second by Sylvia. Discussion? Roll call vote.
Casada?
Aye.
Herbold?
Aye.
Moore? Aye. Maher?
Aye.
Carrie?
And then Resolution 1816 similarly renews the 2080 agreement between the city and Johnson County for seat services. For at least a couple years now, the contract price has been $25 per ride. For quite a few years, it was a set fee, and seats said to us, you might want to consider this $25 a ride because you'll pay a lot less, and that has proved to be true. And so it depends on the clientele, so that could change. But for now, the recommendation is to renew it $25 per ride, same arrangement as last year. The other terms of the agreement are identical as before. I've reviewed them; they're acceptable. Resolution 1816 is before you.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Dottie, second by Sylvia. Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Herbold?
Aye.
Moore? Aye. Maher?
Aye.
Casada?
Aye.
Carrie?
Okay.
And I think the rest of the items on the agenda either have or will come up. Excuse me, on my legal report, either have or will come up at other places in the agenda.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Any questions for Steve? Okay, we'll move to Chris Anderson, clerk report.
I sent out my clerk and the updated building permit spreadsheet. As we've discussed, there is the moratorium on the rental permits, so there is no update to that spreadsheet. One item that I want to announce, and I'm assuming it's already on the website, the candidate forum will be held at Horn School on Wednesday, March 21st at 7:30 p.m. Paul DeYoung will be the moderator, and questions are going to be organized, I believe, by Pat Bauer, Paul DeYoung, and Mike Haverkamp.
Do any of these individuals have any positions on any of the candidates?
I do not know.
I want to ask, and I would feel more comfortable because I've heard some comments from some residents, and they would contraindicate that at least one member of that committee lineup has potential conflict of interest in drafting these questions. And so I'd like to make sure that, forum goes without a hitch, and if there's time to do that, there's time to do that now.
Steve, do you want to?
Well, I was just, the forum is not a council. It's not a city-sponsored forum, is it? I mean, it's just.
It is. We're paying with tax dollars. Yeah.
They're not having recording.
There was an allotment for the budget made for that by Lisa.
I know, but I think it's for the one. It's not that one, because I asked him if it was going to be recorded, and he said we can't do it and get it back before the election in a good time.
Sure. I totally understand. I just want to make sure that everything is above board and that there's no, complaints or any comments like that. And I think having a group of people that are managing the questions that are at least not publicly posting or stating their positions on how they're going to vote would be important. So, Chris, if you wouldn't mind doing a survey of the individuals to see if they've made any postings or any public announcements that might surface, that would be great. What? No, it's not asking you to disclose. It's just asking you. No, this is a group that's put on candidate forums going back 6 or 8 years. That's not in question, right? The question is whether any positions have been made by any of these people publicly.
They always had positions, but everybody knows what those positions are, and it's been run fair and above board the entire time.
I'm just conveying the preliminary feedback I'm getting. So, okay, that's
There's
fine.
3 people working together. I think they're going to be able to manage to formulate questions that will be fair. They did that before, I believe, for our candidate forum. It was horrifying, but but the questions were fine.
Well,
Okay.
so okay, that's fine.
Is there anything else you have? No?
Candidates need not come. They were invited, they accepted, they've been provided with questions.
I think it's more of a residential issue, Pat.
We have Finance Committee, and we have third consideration of ordinance number 214. Did you want to speak to that?
I did. I wanted to postpone voting on this one until, actually, Louise, you and I get together to put together a process for nominations for this commission. Let's just bring a process together, and we'll do it at the next council meeting.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Yep.
And then you have consideration of ordinance 222.
That's right. After discussions amongst council at the last council meeting, I think we walked away with some good consensus on points that we wanted to consider, and they have been included in the council packet. And I would like to, state that the changes that are proposed by Nick Herbold as a balance to improve Ordinance 203, which is the original conflicts of interest from 2017, are fine for now. I think they meet everybody's general consensus. And
not everybody.
No, not
okay,
everybody.
that's fine. But I think they meet the consensus for securing a level playing field of having a counselor who has a conflicts of interest from being treated no differently than a resident who has a bid before council consideration and happens not to be on city council discussing favorably or unfavorably after their own business. So I think the 3 things that came across from Nick Herbold's comments were, one, that we should add a perceived conflicts of interest item in there. I think that's perfectly fine. I think our residents would be comfortable with that. Many of them are already familiar with that standard. Number 2, all we're doing is removing a counselor with a conflict of interest from the table to speak from the position that a regular, ordinary citizen in our community would be subject to. So I think it's a 5-minute limit.
Sylvia, they are no longer regular citizens per se. They are council members, and they represent the council. There's a certain code required with that.
But Dottie,
and furthermore, if you have declared a conflict, you do not participate in any discussion, whether from the council table or from the chair out there or the hallway. You do not participate. So I will not concur with that evaluation or that assessment of it being correct.
well, you voted for the current existing ordinance right now.
No.
Yes, you did.
No,
Yes,
I
you
did
did, ma'am.
not.
It's in the minutes. And you're in the minutes as having supported a counselor with a conflict of interest speaking right here in this chair or in that chair without a doubt, unlimited. You allowed that. All I'm saying is
I'm just saying I
you're
will not
leveling the
support
playing
it now.
field. Well, if you don't approve this amendment or this change, you are allowing a person with a conflict of interest to continue to vote
No.
and talk about their
I don't
posi-
like the conflict policy as it's written. period.
Well, why did you vote for it?
I will rewrite it then.
Oh, well, then go at it, because right now, Nick is willing to work with all, to meet us in a middle ground, and I think it's, he wants to hear from everyone. I would prefer to have recusal. You would like to have recusal. At the end of the day, I think what's important is to improve the existing conflicts of interest in ordinance so that we can level the playing field. We have
I
right.
would prefer to just allow people to have input.
You mean conflicts at the table? And
No, I don't mean that, Sylvia, and I did not say that. And I would like to ask, what specific conflicts have we had recently?
So in any event, I would like to see us improve
you're not gonna
our
answer that
ordinance.
question.
I would like to see an improvement on the ordinance. And I think
I think we have an ordinance, we have an oath of office that covered it. I think there was discussion in probably before September, in September 2016, about broadening that. But there were a lot of people that spoke and said people should be able to speak. I know you don't agree, but
Well, I might, if you don't mind, I might just take a minute to talk about the notes that I sent out. I identified a few things that I thought would be workable. I thought there was kind of a middle ground. The first one was defining a little bit more precisely what a conflict of interest was. From feedback from Professor Bauer, hearing about this private advantage issue, I thought that was something to bring out, that even when we're talking about the rental issues, I heard comments in the audience about Dottie having a rental. My thought in bringing this is not that we have had a conflict that I know of. I'm not saying that Dottie had a conflict. I'm not saying that, you know, the issues that have come up with other council members that I've identified a conflict. And I don't think that that there has been any recognition of a conflict that any previous council member has had. But I thought that the private advantage language was good to just emphasize, because that, I think, is what the biggest concern would be about if a council member had a kind of a special advantage. It's not just trying to improve the community. I mean, we all would have a conflict of interest if we're just trying to improve the community and we live in the community. So it's obviously that's an exaggeration in one side of the spectrum. I'm going to the other by saying, you know, what we're really concerned about is someone taking advantage of a private advantage. So that was one part of it. The next part was, I really did think symbolically it said something that if you are at council, if we are currently under the current ordinance, they can speak at council table. You know, I heard the comments too from before that people seem to value allowing council members to speak on an issue, even if they have a conflict, because it's a small community, because they may have some insights that would be useful. And so the middle ground I was trying to find there was to say, if they're going to speak, maybe the idea would be they would remove themselves from council table during the discussion, sit in the audience, or they could leave if they want to, but at least if they wanted to, sit in the audience. And if they wanted to speak, they would come and speak like anybody else from the public. And again, I commented before that I thought council members would be able to potentially gauge if they thought that person had a conflict of interest. Maybe they would put less weight or no weight on their comments. Mm-hmm. But I just thought that additional symbolic aspect of coming to the mic that the public uses would be good. And then also I was pointing out that, it might be something that someone would want to do even if they don't have a clear conflict of interest, but just to be on the safe side. If it's something that, maybe they are involved with a little bit more, maybe they don't have the private advantage, but I just thought, it might be an opportunity for them to say, I'm going to play it a little safe here. I do have some comments. I'm not going to vote on it. I'd like to just go to the public and speak that way. So those are my thoughts. I did not present it as a formal necessarily an ordinance to vote on. I took the previous proposals that was in PDF and saved it as a Word document and put in my comments just to get the discussion going, because I knew that was something that there was interest in discussing. So that's what I was trying to do there.
And I propose these changes because we're entering a stage in our city government where we are getting more organized, we're getting a bit more structured, and we're getting ready to start making major repairs and improvements to our city, which necessarily will trigger taxpayer dollars. We're also going to be receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars within the next, several years. And I think having your counselors vote with the cleanest of appearances or the cleanest of hands is always the best way. Sunshine around these votes is really important. You don't want reputations to be damaged. You want the opportunity to at all times say the record reflects there was no conflicts of interest reported, and you should be able to stand by that as an elected official. As we all know, if you have a conflict of interest and you say it, you've got the conflict of interest. It's not what the rest of the counselors want to impose on you as a label or as a sneer. It's what you have to say. And I think by creating a process that is clean and protective of everyone's rights, meaning the counselors who don't have a conflict and the public who may have a conflict but can't have the privilege of speaking as a counselor from the counselor seat, I think that's super important to level that playing field. And
so if you have a conflict of interest and you don't declare it, you don't have to declare it. I'm trying to see.
That wasn't my intent. I was saying.
I'm saying that's, yeah. You don't have to declare. I mean, you have a conflict. If you declare you have a conflict.
Citizens can challenge that, Lisa, and votes can be undone. So that is a protection that even the Iowa Code contemplated. So litigation solves a lot of things as well.
Well, I think there are a lot of ways to have sunshine and transparency that we're kind of a little more lax on.
Well,
so we're having, how many meetings have we had? How is that transparent? How is that sunshine? People can't come to this many meetings. They certainly don't want to binge watch University Heights Council meetings, which actually only our regular meeting is televised. So people don't know what we're talking about. They don't know what we're doing.
Well, Lisa, our website is down in terms of we're
not down, Sylvia. We have our website. We have the website.
We don't have a nice way of communicating with an electronic publication from the city as opposed to an individual. And I think we'll be moving in those directions because, we haven't had the funding as the budget cycle showed us. It takes money to get some of these things in order. So I'm looking forward.
We could also talk about meeting with developers one-on-one without recording. And I think our zoning commissioner brought that up in one of his reports.
Right. So
there are many things that we could do that we don't seem to want to do. We just want to limit someone.
So there you go with a personal advantage. That's an excellent example. If there's a personal advantage,
I don't think there's a personal advantage.
If there's an appearance,
when people have the ability to judge, if you've declared a conflict and you have something to contribute, and what is the degree of conflict that people have?
Well, this is what I would say. If we're on my issue, my part of the agenda, I don't know if we're on mine or Sylvia's, but I was trying to, my habit or the habit I'm trying to start this year is to throw out ideas. They don't have to. I'm not trying to throw them at the last second that we have to vote on them right at that time. If you guys have feedback and if you want to craft something that has consensus, then I would encourage feedback. If you want to, provide feedback, I think that would be great. I think also, like I said, Professor Bauer gave good feedback. I don't know if we want to, provide more insights in that regard to the community from the work that you've done, or if other people from the community want to speak on this, I think it would be good. But I'm not offering, I'm not trying to push this today. I don't know.
I'm just in the interest of time, I would recommend and I would suggest and I would move that we table this for tonight.
Are you going to propose the amendments that you want to introduce? Because now I think we have two. We have
I think that Nick has some good ideas. I think that Pat Bauer's comments and Nick's comments were excellent.
And why aren't you supporting the changes tonight then?
And I think that we could come up with crafting something that is more representative of the community.
And it could be good to wait until we have another council member. We have an entire council instead of 4 people.
Well, we've been working on this since January, so that wouldn't
Well,
surprise me.
we've been working on rental
Mhm.
ordinances also.
Okay, perfect.
So we'll move it
Since
to.
last
So we'll move it
April's
to
meeting
April,
and-
right.
April.
And see from
Right.
there.
Mhm.
And then, do you want to continue, Sylvia?
Absolutely.
With your items?
Yep, discussion on the Code of Conduct. Code of Conduct was circulated in the March packet. I hope you all had an opportunity to read that. The genesis of the Code of Conduct comes about probably in 2016 when Dottie Maher, myself, and Jerry Zimmerman received an email from a resident in University Heights who encouraged us to look towards a Code of Conduct to assist council in behavior. And when I started doing the research over the Code of Conduct, it was, I thought it was a great idea, only because it sets expectations of performance standards, and it's adopted widely in a number of different communities. So it's not an unusual code of conduct to have. Sometimes it goes by the name of Code of Ethics, Code of Conduct, and you also find conflicts of interest as part of a code of ethics or a code of conduct. So I proposed bringing on board the language that I submitted, which has an interesting local history. It was passed by West Branch several years ago, but it has its origins out in the West Coast. And it's been used by a number of different cities throughout the nations as a springboard for adoption. So I'd like to get your initial feedback on this because in tandem with conflicts of interest, I think we're setting up our city to have an organizational structure that promotes civility at council meetings and the opportunity to make public office an engagement that should not be a personal affront to anyone. It should be it should be an engagement that more residents should be willing to serve and step up to the plate as being, city leaders. And I think that having a code of conduct does nothing more than already underscore some of the conduct that you see at council and clarify some of the conduct that you should expect to see at council.
I think it sort of could be defined as just rules of good behavior.
Yeah, you could do that.
And I think it would be, maybe it's not necessary because we should all be able to behave accordingly, but maybe it's a good idea.
Well, it's a good idea, and I can certainly put together instances where the good behavior hasn't been exemplified, but I think it does go sometimes to addressing, personalities or characters, right? So we've got situations where you had staff attacking a resident who was making a public comment. That's one instance. Another instance, you have a developer who uses a explicit towards the research that a resident shows up with and shares to council. What resident wants to inform council has research, and the developer uses an explicit to reference the research and hard work that's been performed by this resident, and no one on council does anything. Mayor Frum, you were not the then current mayor when that happened. So so we have instances where we have failed as a council to demand protections, at least at minimum, for our residents who take the time to be here. And I think we need to, my point is that we need, this code of conduct right now is written towards counselors only, so I will be showing up with the code of conduct that picks up staff as well. Because after considering the instances of where a code of conduct would have been helpful to say, hey, this code of conduct provision says you respect your public comments as much as disagreeable as they may be with respect and civility, that didn't happen. So I think we need to have those expectations to guide behavior from everyone, and that should include staff, city staff, and the counselors. And under this model, it's the mayor and the mayor pro tem. And in failing of these two members of the body to enforce, it's up to the council to proceed as a group. And the tools for enforcing this is everything from a private reprimand, a written public reprimand, and take it from there.
Is this like West Branch, Iowa's code where they even address, it's not just when you're here, it's how you behave outside of council meetings?
I can't remember West Branch, but West Branch did pick up the West Coast language that I found. So it's in a number of different cities.
Is what you presented to council the same as what was in the February packet?
Was it February or March? I thought it was March.
This is March.
And there was nothing.
Oh, the February. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, because this is tabled. Mm-hmm.
Now you're going to be polite, right?
Maybe.
Now, come on.
So I have been harping on a code of conduct since conflict of interest was first brought up. I read the West Branch Code of Conduct because that's where the conflict of interest was supposedly taken from. Having read the February submission, it is lax and it is light on almost everything that I have called for and that is necessary. If we're going to do this, and if the council is going to move for a code of conduct and a code of ethics to where they treat each other, the staff, and the residents with some sort of decorum, it is best if they go full force. Doing this halfway isn't going to cut it. The February packet submission is halfway. It doesn't address any of the issues. It doesn't provide any teeth to the subject. If you look at the West Branch, it actually provides for the censorship of a counselor. So those counselors who cannot behave at the table, who repeatedly say not only rude things to other counselors, but attack staff on a regular basis, sometimes in a meeting, every staff member has been attacked by this same counselor. So if we're going to do this, do it full force. There are a list of bad behaviors that can be described by multiple counselors over the last several years. And I could go through, and while Counselor Quesada gave you a couple of specific examples, I could bore you all night with them. Because I have written about them repeatedly. You can go back and watch the tapes, and there's no doubt of what I'm talking about. So I'm urging the council that if you're going to approach this, that if you're going to move on this, that every council member needs to go and look at what West Branch has and not do this halfway. Do it full force and make a decision that's going to stand and make these council meetings have some sort of decorum.
Now, why are you interested only in West Branch? Because other municipalities
Because
have
it is
a varying degree of, after you look at several, you're like, okay, this one is way out over here, this one is way over here. You want to reach a middle ground in order to get people to agree to something.
Because when I brought this up, I looked at 20 different cities, not only here, but across states, and found that West Branches had the most comprehensive and had a council that was behaving before they had the code of conduct at almost the same form of disrespect that I find this council to operate with.
I don't think anybody in this council is using explicits with the, that was part of their situation. They were using explicits in front of each other on the record. And it wasn't until one of those counselors, out of his personal pocket and dollar, started video recording and circulating everything, that the community became aware of how much disrespect.
Did you watch the previous 2 years of council? Do you remember the things that, no, of this one? The things that were said at this table, the demeaning remarks that came to the members of the staff that are here, the demeaning remarks that were said between councils, the accusations that were made between council persons.
Well, that's what this code of conduct would approve. It would say
that code of conduct doesn't do anything.
Expectations. So, hey, public comments are always welcomed, Jace. So thank you.
Does council want to consider?
It was just discussion, but I want to know what direction we can group as a group.
Right. Do you want to continue this discussion at the April meeting? You want to?
I'm gonna table it for now and let the next counselor join us on the conversation.
Okay. That
Yeah.
sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And then you have two other items.
Yep. Well, Nick, this is
I think
yours.
I think we already-
He
Okay,
kinda
so
covered his.
kind of tabled on that. The farmers market season. Resolution 1812 calls for establishing the farmers market season. I had a meeting with the vendors at the end of January to discuss what the prospects were for returning for farmers market and where they wanted to be, given the fact that the athletic club is rebuilding and we probably won't be there in the next 2 years at all. So we had a good discussion as to, the prospects of the farmers market, which is an evolving question. It's a moving target. And we came up with the solution that we want to try out Marietta, the 200 block of Marietta. And we think that because the vending would be facing the sidewalk area of 200 Marietta,
side.
the south side, that it won't pose a safety risk because the vending will not take place on the street. It's just on the sidewalk. And we think that the city has a reasonable right to request that the license permit holders, these are individuals who have a permit, that provided sufficient notice, they would be willing to cooperate with us in freeing up the Tuesday space from 4 to 7 or 3 to 8 p.m., that we think this would be a good idea to have the farmers market there. We're hoping that by bringing it to a more centralized neighborhood location, we're able to continue to build the relationships with those neighbors that have been supporting the farmers market and the neighbors that haven't gone because it's just been too far away out in the athletic club. So with that in mind, I thought that it would be a reasonable change of venue for our vendors to take, and they agreed. They're willing to do it. And there's no music. We're not going to be funding any music or any activities like that. But so it's just the sale and purchase at this location. So
And then you might mention you talked to Nate about.
I talked to Chief Nate to see what he thought of the police ability to assist with, with traffic, and he thought that closing down George Street or a segment of it might be more problematic. And I think everyone agrees that let's give this a try without closure and see where it goes. And if it's a popular hangout that is drawing quite a bit of folks, we'll come back to council and make changes at that time, but with a little bit more knowledge base.
FYI, if it could not impact George at any condition because the condominium complex is accessed on George, and that would be an Iowa City issue. So,
No, if there's any closure, it would not at all involve any of the streets. So even Tower Court, which is a street south of Marietta on the 100 block, that would not be closed off whatsoever. It's just right now that's not even on the table. All that's on the table is let's have essentially a farmer's market on the sidewalk of the 200 block of Marietta with parking notices to go out within, it's March.
And
what about
could
the
Nate
people?
Speak to some of the things he thought.
Yeah,
Would
we
that
had,
be okay?
and Mayor Fromm and I had talked a little bit about the signage. We have the permit parking signs that are up now. It would be my recommendation that we put signs up to match those that say the permit parking sign is above it. We put signs below it that say the date or the months of the farmers market and the days with the hours, so that if in the event that there are cars parked there that we do have to have towed or they're ticketed because they can't park there during that time, everyone was given notice not only by when they purchased the permit and now before it starts this year.
What about the persons that are driving there? Where will they be parking their cars? Like before, you know, they could park them up at the university place.
Right. With the vendors would be, I'm assuming, all in a location. Parking would be on either end of Marietta. I'm not sure where, if we have all the vendors at one end and the parking would be open to the other end.
Okay.
Because we won't fill that whole block as far as I know with vendors. So there'll be still a decent amount of parking there.
Okay. And so, what did you check on the price of the signs?
Yeah, I mean, we're probably looking at a few $100, $300 to $300-ish for roughly 4 signs. Just it kind of depends on how much wording we put on them, if they're reflective, non-reflective, the different coatings that can go on them to protect them for longer amounts of time. It really just it varies a lot, but that's a good starting point.
Yeah, and you discussed no through traffic.
Yeah, without the closure, we kind of talked today. If you have vehicles backed in there, the sale should be occurring on the sidewalk or in the grass.
Right.
Our concern when I was talking with the mayor was that, you're standing there as a parent purchasing something and your child wanders 3 steps away. Now they're in the road. Not a full closure of Marietta, but allowing no through traffic. So if anyone that lives in the 200 block or is parked there, they know what the farmers market's going on. My concern would be someone coming from George or from Sunset to cut through and not be paying attention to the additional foot traffic that's in the area. So putting those barricades on either end that still allow for vehicles to drive around them, but if someone does go around them, they understand. Yeah.
Right. No, anything to slow down the vehicle is always a good a good strategy. So I'm willing to work with that. If you can get an itemization of what you think these additional costs would be.
The signs. Yep.
Yeah, that would be great, because we do have, I think, like a $90-some net profit from this past season that we could probably use.
Okay.
And then start, there are some corporate sponsorships that I'm looking into. That would be helpful for me to know what our expenses are looking at.
Yep, I'll get you those.
Okay, super. All right, so.
Resolution 1812 is up on the board.
Yep, I'd like to motion adoption of 18-12.
Okay, there's a motion by Sylvia. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Nick. Discussion. Roll call vote.
Casada.
Aye.
Moore. Or Maher, excuse me. I'm going the other way.
Aye.
You said
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Moore.
sorry.
Aye.
Herbold.
Aye.
Carrie.
Okay, and then the report.
Yep, farmer's market. I provided a synopsis of what took place, how much it cost. I was happy to say that we didn't tap our budget allotment for the year, so that's a pretty good indicator that with corporate sponsorships we can accomplish quite a bit. So I want to thank Curbs from Coralville for being our corporate sponsor that helped us subsidize heavily our vendor stalls. And then our vendors were joined the farmers market family when they signed up for an early bird discount. So that was a good marketing strategy. Apart from that, we also had some vendors who made extra contributions or donations. So I was really thrilled to see that they value the market enough to pay well above what they were being asked to pay. So if you have any questions on the farmers market report, it's in the council packet. And I think that's about it in the interest of time. And then I would like to ask that we adopt the payment of warrants. If anybody has any questions on those. I'd like, did we adopt the warrant? I don't think we adopt the warrants. Didn't adopt the warrants, so I'd like to motion adoption of the warrants.
Can I just say, is there any objection to paying the bills?
Yeah.
Hearing none?
Yes.
The bills are paid by unanimous
Thank you.
consent? How
Yay.
about that?
Perfect.
Okay, and then after that, and there's 3 pages. Somehow I lose it.
Nope, but you're on page number 3.
I know, it's just, where is it? Police chief report.
I don't have a lot to add to my report other than the February report. If you remember, we, with Nick's assistance, set up the mystery reader program at Borlaug. Officer Sandifer and I did that yesterday, actually. It initially was supposed to be 1 classroom.
Look at the
We turned into, they invited all 3 classrooms, so we had roughly 75 to 80 kindergartners there for the reading part. Due to the weather yesterday, we were not able to go outside, So I'm working with one of the kindergarten teachers to set up a later point because they wanted to go outside and see the cars and some other things. So we were there for about an hour. They had a lot of questions. We probably could have spent all afternoon there, but that was a good time.
It's like a council meeting, isn't it?
Oh yeah. The only other thing, I guess, in addition to my report, it doesn't have in there the parking citations, but I know we're somewhere roughly 40 or 50 of those were issued last month. I got to say that even with the number of traffic stops we had, which I think was 450-ish, I get weekly complaints about parking and as well as the driving in town. Just know that I hope those numbers reflect the fact that we are out there and we are trying to curb those behaviors, but unfortunately, people still behave the way they do. So
when you're talking about parking, do you want to talk about the Spencer parking ticket? And
sure.
Now, so.
Yeah, as far as her comments, we made no phone calls to anyone. The notices were given as per the ordinance. With the Marietta parking permits, we had historically, back to Chief Ford, as far as I know, they've been given 72 hours. The ordinance states that you can't park a vehicle on the city streets for longer than 48 before it's considered or could be considered street storage without moving it. Those, because they're permitted, and it's just historically the ordinance does not reflect what's been done. In her case, as she said, it was a considerable amount of time longer than even the 72. And Hawkeye was having the issues with the snow removal. Based on where her vehicle was parked, they couldn't plow that spot or a spot and a half to 2 on either side. So there were 5 parking spots that were under a foot and a half of snow that nobody else could use.
So how many days was she parked there?
She was parked there. It was given the notice as provided by the ordinance on the driver's side window that it would be towed in 72 hours. She was actually given an additional half a day because it wasn't towed. Could have been towed the night before. It wasn't towed till the following morning at 10 a.m. So she was there for roughly 84 hours from the time of the notice, and she had been parked there, as she stated, for
Did we
4 or 5 days.
Did we establish that she had gotten a sheet of rules when she got?
She said that she did not, because she didn't actually come in and purchase the permit herself.
Okay.
So that information was not forwarded to her, which I guess is part of the issue by you not buying your own permit. She also wouldn't be eligible because she doesn't live in University Heights. So.
Yeah, and that's why the end of our section, I put that on, just discussion about this permit process generally. I don't know the history of it. I think it's pretty clear from the rules that the intent is not to store cars there. It says that right in there. The idea that, resident bought it for a non-resident, I just don't know that that was the intent. She clearly, well, I shouldn't say she clearly, she seemed to not understand that it wasn't for car storage. Obviously, our community parking is at a premium, and the idea that someone who lives in the other side of the river would be storing a car in our community was pretty surprising to me to hear that that was what was going on. I think those parking spots should be used for residents. So I don't know if anybody on council or if Steve has any additional history on how that all came about. But if there are changes we need to think about, then maybe that would be something to do, not tonight, but sometime. But otherwise, I would recommend not agreeing to do anything in terms of responding to her requests. I think she was, clearly storing a car there in violation of the rules. And
again, she's in violation.
And she is now. I mean, I hope that my comment at least has her go move it now. Otherwise, it will be towed again tomorrow. Would be the understanding.
Yep.
So,
I'd be supportive of revisiting, irrespective of whether there's history on the Marietta parking lot, just from a concept of a community asset, a city asset. It's like the right of way. We need to take care of how we use our assets. And I would like to modernize whatever processes we have, review them, and pass some judgment on them to see if they're if they make sense. I mean, like you said, your interest is to see it go to residents. My interest is to see that, maybe residents or, here we are having all these people renting all of these, locations to the hospital. Maybe that's a way of helping that situation. I don't know. I think it would be a good opportunity for us to revisit the use of the city asset and not just look at it as an annual permitting process, but something a little bit more holistic.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that would be a good idea. I don't know what the next step would be in terms of getting that discussion going. If we want to talk about
Working
it,
group?
yeah, next
Committee?
or if I don't know
If you wanted to work on the committee, I'm happy to help.
well, I don't know if what I might do is look at sending out some comments in advance of next meeting and seeing if there's maybe more discussion we could have at the next meeting, whether that's at this.
And I have also a comment. I think that we were discussing at one time the tickets, and then dismissing tickets that were received. I would like to recommend that if an officer finds a violation and finds that it is a violation of the ordinance or a statute, that they take a photograph of it, because then you will have proof and evidence, and then it would be very easy to deal with the ticket situation without having to rationalize why.
Right, and we actually, with either the body cameras or the squad car cameras, for instance, Stan actually notified me this morning of a vehicle that was parked in a yard. I have that on both dash camera and my body camera as issuing the citations. There's video of both, so yeah, we've started doing that.
Then you have evidence, and there's no question about dismissing. You know. That's
And I have, if you wanted to see it, I obviously don't have it right now, but I can happily show you the video from where her vehicle was parked, and there's squad and body cam video from that as well.
Then we need. I'm an old, prosecutor, so you need evidence.
Right, I understand.
Okay.
Why don't we put it in a form of a vote for the parking ticket?
Do you want to?
Oh,
for hers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Motion to dismiss.
So
You want to
basically
consider to dismiss or to what do you say? Uphold. That's the word.
I move to uphold the
Spencer's parking ticket and refund towing fee.
I'll second.
Yeah, and to not refund the towing
Yeah.
fee. Yeah.
To uphold the parking ticket and
To not dismiss the parking
Yeah.
ticket and refund the towing fee.
well, we're going to do the opposite. Uphold.
All right, we'll do uphold.
And there's a second by
Yeah.
Sylvia. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Okay, motion carries.
So I'll be really quick on some of this other stuff. So in terms of third consideration of ordinance number 216, so this is the one where we would grant the chief authority to dismiss certain tickets. This was passed twice last year. It came up this year. The feedback was basically, let's look at some of the guidelines for when the chief would be dismissing the tickets, which made sense. I've talked to Nate. Basically, the position that I'm putting forth on this is either number one, we would pass it with the understanding that the chief would only be dismissing tickets if he found that they were not a violation of the ordinance. Otherwise, they would continue with the same process. So it would just be an ability for him to, if he thinks, hey, this was written by an officer and it really wasn't a violation, or upon more information, I found it's not a violation, then he would have the authority to dismiss it. So that is the interpretation of that we would be putting forth. On the other hand, this is not something that I'm hearing Nate feels very strongly about. If we want, as a council, every ticket to go to us, I don't have a huge horse in this race either way, so I don't mind either way. I was curious what the rest of council thought.
Well, I think if we have the evidence, it would be easy for the council to, just review this and get it off the back of the police, because if you've got it, you've got it. It's an easy decision.
Well, either way, they'd be able to go to the council. It's just, if we want to give the chief the ability to say, you don't even have to bother council with this. It wasn't a violation. Now that I have more evidence, you don't have to go to council. He would just have the ability to dismiss it. That's the only authority that we are talking about. Before there was discussion about, well, if it's a, UPS truck, I know there were a lot of different examples. That's not where we're going with this. It would just be saving a little bit of council time if we know for sure it is not a violation, or if he finds, the chief finds it is not a violation.
I would feel comfortable working with this proposal, so long as your monthly report alerts to council how many citations you have disposed of. I'd like to monitor the rate at which that is
maybe
happening.
the reason, because, if it's clear that they were faultily given, then that's one reason, and.
Right. Absolutely. Yep. Not a problem.
Yeah, so, okay.
Is what you're recommending, Nick, is that different than the third consideration? I mean,
I don't think so. That'd be maybe a question for Steve. My understanding was that the debate was outside of the actual ordinance, unless we would firm up the language by clarifying the only reason he could dismiss it is if, all the elements of the violation were not met.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can change the language to however you want it to read. I think the way this came up was there was a person that was wanting to contest something, and I think that the chief thought it was clearly, there was a misunderstanding or something, and it shouldn't have been issued, but the chief looked at the ordinance and said, I really can't dismiss it. And then there was some issues about this person being able to get scheduled to come to the council, so it went on for 2 or 3 months. And then, so the idea was, well, shouldn't we come up with some alternate method of somebody in the community, the chief, being able to look at an obvious oversight, you might call it, and dismiss it? That's where it came from. So if you want, however you want to word it, that's your,
cover that. I
Yeah.
mean, she has it up there. Do you want to move it up a little? Just so we can see more of the. Well, leave it there for a minute.
Yeah, I guess the question is just, before we were discussing what criteria the chief was using for the appeal, I think we have a consensus here in terms of what the chief would be doing. It just would be whether we would put that in the actual ordinance, that he shall only, have authority to dismiss the ticket if he finds that, that it was not actually a violation, and then he shall report to council, on a monthly basis how many he dismisses and reasons why they were not a violation.
Actually, I'd be happy if just the ordinance were left as is, because I think, as I recall, the big issue as to why this has ended up postponed and delayed is because the ordinance did not have underlying procedures. And I know that Dottie and Jerry were supposed to work on those procedures and bring them to council, et cetera. So
I think the current ordinance just says that any citation has to be reviewed by council. So without adding the
right, and I think the changes took place, but then the proposed changes from ordinance reading 1 and 2 hinged on, well, there's no underlying procedure saying you have to take a picture. That's where you were at. And so that's how I understood the stall, on why we're not passing the third. So I'm happy to say I continue to support the general concept of amended ordinance 1 and 2 going into 3, because I know that 3 you're saying you're going to report on it. It's going to become part of your practice. And so long as it becomes part of your practice, I'm comfortable allowing this much discretion not coming to the council.
Well, and with the evidence,
There's less discretion.
Less discretion,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, so third consideration of ordinance number 216 is before you.
Do you want a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Nick, second by Sylvia. Discussion, roll call vote.
Herbold.
Aye.
Casada.
Aye.
Maher.
Aye.
Moore. Carried.
Okay, Nick, you can continue.
Okay, so I'll be extremely brief. These are more of those items that I'm just bringing up to see if there's interest in pursuing them further. The first one would be, and I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm skipping over anything you wanted to say, but it would be
fill in the blanks.
Yeah, it'd be Iowa Code Section 321. So this is the dealing generally, Iowa Code Chapter 321 is dealing with traffic generally. Sections 449 to 446 are dealing
66
or 466 are dealing with commercial vehicle or yeah, do you want to?
Right. Yeah. So the city adopted most of the 321 code section of the Iowa Code. What they left out was the bottom half of that code that relates specifically to commercial motor vehicle traffic, whether it's any safety violations or overweight, overheight, logbook hours. If a commercial motor vehicle was involved in a crash, if we had a DOT officer respond and it occurred within the city, they would do the investigation as far as what the violations were, but those violations would still be covered by our accident report and our charges if there were needed to be any. Presently, those are just charged under state code because it just wasn't adopted. So.
And my understanding from prosecuting and defending these in the past that they're pretty big. They can be pretty big fines. Is that right?
Yeah, that kind of ties into the oversized permits.
Trying to protect our streets in a sense.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you have like the university with the cranes, some of the cranes they brought in for that North End Zone project, one of our part-time officers works full-time at the DOT. Those can be upwards of 120 to 150,000 pounds for the really big ones. At an 80,000 pound weight limit on most roadways, they're roughly double. And as you see, that's why, in large part, why you see the issues on Olive Court, the issues why you're replacing so many panels on Melrose, because the potholes form after one of those large trucks goes over. It causes the small cracks in the concrete, the water gets in there. He said that's very noticeable on Olive because of the heavy traffic that went down there to build those homes and all of those larger trucks. It is his opinion and the opinion of the DOT that if you had your side streets such as Kozer, Sunset, or not Sunset, but Oakcrest, Mahaska, those roads would maintain for a long time just with your average motor vehicle, your car, your pickup, but you have larger issues on Melrose and Sunset because of where University Heights is located. You have a lot of commercial traffic that comes through here on a daily basis.
So it would basically be generating some income in relation to citing people for.
If we had a vehicle that we thought was overweight, we can request a DOT officer with their portable scales come weigh that vehicle, and they tell us what the weight of that vehicle is, and the citation would be able to be issued under city ordinance as opposed to state.
So the question, I guess, is whether there's interest in pursuing that.
I mean, I know, when they were bringing trucks of dirt out from the Children's Hospital, because that hole is forever deep. But what about when the hotel is being built?
That's
Are
what
there
I'm
going to be?
thinking. Yes.
Yeah, it would be the same, especially the oversized. If they bring in any kind of cranes to put the air conditioning units on the roof or anything like that, the oversized permit would require that. Iowa City requires it. They don't charge a fee for it. They just require that you get the permit, and they address violations that happen from there. Other cities require $50 or $100 fees to purchase the permit, and then if you are in violation by not having the permit, you're subject to all the. If you don't have the permit and you're oversized, overheight, anything like that, the vehicle has to conform to normal 80,000 pounds. The length, the height has to be what the code says. Anything beyond that, you're required to have that permit. And it's the responsibility of the trucking company or the business that's bringing that vehicle through to call every city along the route, including the state, and make sure they don't have to have a permit for those roadways. It's not in any way the city's responsibility to notify them that they need it.
What would be the administrative burden on us to issue the permits?
We already order the Marietta parking passes. If you wanted to do a sticker on the vehicle so that it was more obvious when they were coming through, you could do that. But as far as the state just gives them, they have to outline the route that they're going to take from when they leave their starting point to where they're ending at. It's just essentially a piece of paper that gives them, however the wording is with Steve, whatever the wording would be in the permit.
Who would do that then?
They would just call the police department, and we would issue those either with the fee, or if we do it like Iowa City and not charge a fee, just require that they have it. So just
Paul? Oh, there's a question with Paul.
What can we consider an oversized weight for on our streets?
So your main roads, Melrose and Sunset, from like talking to our DOT officer, it's 80,000 pounds. So a regular semi can drive down the roadways up to 80,000 pounds. What you're looking at, any vehicle that you would see on the interstate that has the oversized load, the cranes or the large construction equipment, anything like that that comes through would need that permit.
Like a 30-ton concrete mixing truck.
They're within regulations. They're not oversized or overweight. It's basically the state of Iowa. The code defines how long, how tall, how wide, and how much a commercial motor vehicle can weigh. If they are beyond those limits, they're required to be labeled as oversized, and then they're subject to the permits because of that.
Nick, have you kind of studied this with Nate? So
Yeah, I mean, then really what we're looking for is if there's interest in, tell me if I'm wrong, Steve, but I mean, putting this pretty simply, we're not changing the state laws. We're just making them ordinances so that they can be enforced under ordinances.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just need to make sure there's a statute that talks about incorporating provisions of 321, and I need to make sure this is permitted, but other than that, I think you're okay.
Yeah. I think it's a good idea.
So you'll continue working on it and bring it back?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds like
I
that's
see
okay.
some head nods
Okay.
here. Thank you.
And then, let's see. Do you want to talk about the towing issue really quickly?
Yeah, the administrative tow fee has been an up and down issue, I think, in the past, but essentially we're sort of taking what Cedar Rapids has and sort of not. Cedar Rapids charges that fee for absolutely everything that they tow. We're specifically looking at incidents where it involves a driving issue of some kind. The driver is arrested, the vehicle can't obviously be parked on the roadway, or if there's any kind of hold placed on the vehicle, if the owner is not valid to drive, if they're intoxicated, they have to come back to the police department and get a release of their vehicle from the impound lot, which is typically at Big Ten, that they have to show they're either valid or they're not intoxicated so that they can safely operate the vehicle or that it has insurance on it. We have, I would say, a half a dozen to a dozen of those within probably 6 every 2 weeks, so probably almost a dozen or a little more than that a month that fall in that category.
Fridays, maybe?
Yeah, between just non-valid drivers and intoxicated. So
What's a non-valid driver?
they're suspended, barred, revoked, or they just chose to not get a license and they only have an ID card.
Mhm.
So,
And what's the administrative fee? Are you getting to that?
yeah, the administrative fee is up to council decision. Cedar Rapids is $500. I know others that are $50. There's kind of a wide range. So my proposal would be $200, but council can decide what they want to set that at if they want to.
I think that's fair.
Are you pulling in a lot of students, or what's your demographics?
I mean, it's really all over the board.
Yeah.
We have everywhere from the 18-year-old students who are not valid to drive or who are intoxicated, all the way up to 50, 60-year-olds that just have a substance abuse problem or aren't valid to drive.
How much time does it typically take you to deal with one of these?
On scene, between the paperwork and waiting for the tow, 30 to 40 minutes, and then when they come in for the release, another 20 if we don't have to go out to Big Ten. If we have to actually go out there and supervise, if they don't feel comfortable releasing the vehicle, the person themselves, we'll go out there and supervise that for their safety and to make sure it goes smoothly.
So really, you're talking about an hour and a half.
Yeah, probably an hour and a half of an officer's time.
Right.
And the paperwork that goes along with it.
So is that a fair amount of money?
Yeah, I think that would cover. That's a fair amount. That
I
would.
think that sounds a lot.
I don't.
I
I
would
think
be
it's.
happy to entertain 50.
Oh goodness, no.
Because
no.
what's an hourly rate by, say, an officer who would be handling an hour and a half's worth of work?
An hour and a half worth of work would be roughly 30 plus. Again, it varies if you have two officers there. I mean, it kind of.
I'd be.
Yeah, I mean.
Comfortable.
Well, if you're just talking wages, as we've seen,
Mhm.
there are multiple components to what they're paid, plus benefits, plus overhead. I mean, if you actually are looking at it that way, I think
Yeah.
it could be higher. But I think it's
My personal view is it's a learning experience. It's a personal obligation, and it's a good learning lesson. So I mean, 200 I think is very
punitive.
fair, very fair. And it doesn't matter who the perpetrator is. The fact is, they've done the crime, they do the time, so to speak.
for that much time. I don't think that 200 seems punitive to me. Just in that, I mean, that is. We spent a lot of money on our.
Yeah.
I guess if you think of it in the aspect that if that officer's out at Big Ten doing that, and Nick or anyone else, Sylvia, you have another call that is in town, that's either going to require another agency response or the officer is going to have to respond from out there. So it's also putting the burden on the city of, if there's only one officer on duty, that person could be out dealing with that and unable to respond to something else. So it is somewhat punitive in that manner, just because they are taking away the time from the community as well.
Steve, do we have any issues with this amount? I mean, or you had some good insights before.
Yeah, I don't know about the amount. I think we should, I mean, I want to look at it pretty carefully, what offenses it's going to relate to, and from a legal standpoint, whether we have the ability to do that. Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
And we were really just seeing if there's interest in having us spend more time on that before we did that. And I think it would be, my hope would be that it would be an ordinance that is not pushing the envelope, just something that's reasonable to recoup some of the expense we have with these issues.
Or that it isn't, but my concern is that it not be frivolous, that it not be just a pat on the head, because this is pretty serious.
I think one of the things that you come up with, and it's not a legal matter, but I'm going to say it anyway in case any of you wants to pick it up, but this is the kind of issue that comes up that when cities consider this, and, it oftentimes has I don't know if it's disproportionately applied to people that are unable to pay these fees, or but even if it's evenly applied, it hits some people that are, and I'm not trying to be political about it, but guy loses his driver's license for something that he should have lost his driver's license for, but he's got to go to work, so he drives his car, so now he's got $200 more to pay in an administrative fee when he shouldn't have been driving his car because he doesn't have a license. But how's the council feel about those social policy types issues is, I guess, all I'll say about it.
And that's what I was trying to follow up. What's the population that's getting the most dings? Is it students? I'm a little bit less sympathetic because
I would say it's generally the age range of students, but I wouldn't necessarily say that they're University of Iowa students. They are, in a lot of cases, individuals who come to town or to Iowa City in general to go downtown from other communities, and they just happen to be passing through here on their way back to 218 or to other major roadways when they're speeding or running stop signs, whatever.
Well, I think, Steve, if you're interested in just creating it, even with a blank, maybe, I'd be curious to know what you find out about, prohibited charges that we don't want to have the fee associated with, that sort of thing.
Okay.
If there's interest, again, from council.
And I'd be interested in comparable communities.
Okay. Got some more. Is that everything, Nick?
Yep.
Thank you. We'll go to streets and sidewalks. And Dottie, you said you wanted to go straight to the engineer's report.
Yeah.
Thank you, Josiah.
Yeah. Let's see. Submitted a written report. I won't touch on everything. I did want to note for everybody in the meeting and watching that Russ helped out patching quite a lot of the streets lately on pretty quick notice. I also wanted to say a thank you to the City of Iowa City Streets Department. They helped us patch a pothole on the west side of town on Melrose, right near the city limit line, but it would have been more than Russ could have handled, and they responded to that the next day. So I just wanted to say thank you to them.
I got about 3 calls on that.
I've got a couple sheets here for Louise to sign after the meeting. One to follow up to get those 2 lights added by Mid-America, and we've got the form ready to go to add a light to the existing poles at the Kosher Melrose intersection. And then also have your city's annual stormwater report prepared. I just need to get the mayor's signature, and we'll submit that. That's an annual report that we have to submit. The only thing I want to touch on was a note in my report about the Olive Court project. I just wanted to let everybody know that we submitted a schedule in January to start developing that throughout the year to get that built next year. Then came along the discussion on the budget and the funding and what was in and out and the timelines. So I just wanted everybody to know at the moment I'm just holding off on any more of that work at the moment. But I would like to get some direction from council if we're still okay to proceed, because obviously we would be doing some work in the next 2-3 months that would be prior to July 1 of this year, the next fiscal year. So I just want to, before I go any further, I just wanted to see if that was something critical that we wait until July 1st as far as the budgeting goes, or if there's some room that we could at least do some of these things and get them moving, because that would be critical, I think, if you want to stay on that timeline for construction next year.
How much time do you think it will take to redo the entire Olive Court project?
Are you talking about the construction?
Yeah.
We'd want to get it bid this winter, like in December, so the contractor could start early spring, because we want them to be done August 1st,
Okay,
and get out of there.
I'm thinking, after hearing the comments about the weight of the trucks and things on the streets, the condominium development is not finished on the side of the development that leads into Olive. They have one lot there that has not even been dug, and that involves a lot of equipment up and down Olive. So I wouldn't want to consider even, finishing or being near until they are on board with that lot development. So I don't know where Jeff might be on it.
I don't either. I guess two things I think of. One, there is another road in to that lot, which is Lemur Court.
Yeah.
So I think the city's relationship with Jeff is such that you could say, hey, we want you to use Lemur
That
for this
is already
last
being
lot.
pretty beaten up with all of the development on Lemur that fills into Lemur.
Well, so that they have to drive somewhere, I guess is what I'm saying. And ideally that makes sense, but and realistically, subdivisions get built, the roads get built, and then the houses are built. I mean, that's just the way it is. So I don't know if I'd be all that concerned about that, especially given the city's relationship with Jeff. I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to throw good
out.
money after, bad. That's just
I guess the other thing is, if they don't build that lot for another 6 years.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
No, it's the only one that's not built in the whole.
Yeah, so I'm just saying I don't know if it makes sense to wait on that one.
I don't know, and I don't know what the plans are, so it might be worthwhile investigating. But
so I'm not sure if it's it can come tonight, or if you want to think about it, or you've got some other meetings coming up. But I'd just like to find out if I should continue to hold on Olive Court, because I know from the budget presentation tonight, the funds are in the fiscal 19 budget starting July 1st. So if that's a big deal, we can hold off, and I can relook at the schedule. But if there's a way to allow us to do some of the work these next couple months, some schematic design and some of those things, I think it would benefit the schedule and what you'd like to do.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, as much as you can do under the budget limitations, I don't know if that's a Lori question, or how that works. I don't know what the limitation would be.
Well, we're planning for bonding for that project in the next
Correct.
fiscal, in the next calendar year, not this
Right.
one. So,
But in terms of the stuff you're doing, you're saying that you would be incurring expenses that would be anticipated in the bond.
Correct.
and we can recover those in the bond. All we need is good accounting, which means that as you're billing hours, we should set up a separate subject matter line.
And we do. We have a separate line item for
You do.
just for that project.
Okay,
So
perfect.
if you're able to recover,
Yeah.
then it's probably not an issue. But I just wanted to.
Well, yeah, we would have to expense it out from the bonding amount, which is why that would be important and also legal as well. So Steve, to the extent that actually you guys probably do matter itemizations anyway on your billing, that would be good. Yeah. So that's the direction I would give from a finance perspective, so that we can reverse out those charges when we get our bond issued.
What do you think, Steve?
So how do you want it designated?
The same way that Shive does it, which is they do it by matter. So if they're working on Olive Court, he sets up a billing number for that matter. Do you guys do that?
I don't set up numbers. I mean, I tend to.
I just don't know how the filing system works for every law firm.
Yeah, I mean, I just do it by topic, but my topics are broad. I mean, I can somewhat make them. I mean, for what you're talking about, like anything that could be, as you say, reversible, I absolutely separate that out just for that purpose.
Okay,
But
we can hold it. Yeah, because that's where I was going to go anyway with respect to matters.
Sad to slow it down.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Okay, we can talk later on this one if you need.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, I just want to bring it up and get an answer so I'll just hold for now.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Till next, maybe by April, we'll know.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
And do you have any other, and I know before we go into closed session, just be sure to get those things out for me to see.
I will. I got them.
Okay, very good.
I will have more comments later next month about signage issues.
Okay.
So.
And I gave a report on sanitation in my mayor's report. And Lisa, you sent out a report. Okay. And then is there any old business, new business from council?
Yeah, I did. I just want to make sure that the old business section minutes reflect that I did distribute what I said I would, which is the consent agenda information. I sent information from CivPro, our organization. I thought it was a good overview, along with another vantage point of how the consent agenda works for a nonprofit. So I hope that between those two documents, we can get some discussion going for the April meeting. Especially since right now, we're 1, 2, 3, almost 4 hours into this meeting. So,
Okay, just those two. Oh, there's one more. No, there's two.
Is mine there
all right.
too?
So that's it.
Okay, very good.
Old
And-
business, I'm done there.
And are there any announcements? And I am going to move around the agenda somewhat because I feel like some of the people feel they can't speak as long because they're in a bad position of the agenda and the meeting's so long. And also it was recommended that Josiah be moved up so he can leave earlier.
That's right.
And I think that's a good idea. So Chris and I will work on that. And so I need a recommendation of City Council to meet in closed session. Would someone make a motion to recommend?
So move pursuant to Iowa Code Section 21.5 Sub 1C to discuss strategy with council in matters where litigation is imminent, where its disclosure would be likely to prejudice or disadvantage the position of the city.
So I think we actually
changed that wording.
Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah, we actually changed the wording. So it should say, evaluate the professional competency of an individual whose performance is being considered to prevent needless and irreparable injury to that individual's reputation, and that individual requests a closed session. Moved by Nick. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Sylvia. Okay, roll call vote.
Herbold.
Aye.
Casada.
Aye.
Maher.
Aye.
Moore. Aye. Carrie.
Okay, we'll go into closed session. I guess we could stay here.
Yeah.
Because I think most. You ready? Okay, we'll reconvene to open session. Council, Resolution 1819 is before you.
So moved.
Okay, motion by Nick. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Dottie. Discussion. Roll call vote.
Herbold.
Aye.
Casada. Aye. Maher.
Aye.
Moore. Aye. carry.
Is there any objection to adjournment? Hearing none, the meeting's adjourned by unanimous consent. Thank you.
4.5.